Greetings, Greg.
Hello, how's it going?
Good.
Cool. Hey, Joseph, how are you doing?
I'm great.
Awesome. Who else do we have here? Gary Coulter, Kilian, Roberto.
Evening.
I'll give people a few more minutes to join. Ed, do you have the link to the spreadsheet?
Oh, I'm looking for it now. I found one, but it's an import of Excel that has all bad calcs in it. So I'm still looking. I think I have another one.
Okay. So here's what I want to accomplish today. I want to go over some basic facts and take a look at what's been proposed from Synereo with respect to its proposal for funding RChain. And I need people to know this because Synereo's stated architecture document, which on the strength of which it raised the latest crowdfunding, is very much at risk, and I need people to understand that because that's my responsibility to the community and to the investors and to the company. Several months back, Ed and Gal and I prepared a budgeting document, which Ed is about to. Cool, thank you. Ed and I proposed a budgeting document and resourcing for the development effort based upon how the agreed upon architecture. That architecture document has many names on it. Mine isn't even the first one. And it has been reviewed by the community and is the basis of the sort of the principal communication which attracted the investment. There we go. Thank you. We also believe that. Hang on 1 second. Just 1 second. I have to check and see if this is my daughter. Hello. Hello, may I ask who's calling, please?
So nice to see some familiar faces. How's everybody doing? Good.
Hey, good. Was that Patrick talking?
Yes, this was Patrick. What's up, guys?
Hi, Patrick. You're on mute, Greg.
Yeah. Okay. The main point is that we've had lots and lots of time and effort, weeks of effort actually put into budgeting and figuring out roughly what it will take to deliver on the promises. And now, so I can screen share so that people can see. And Ed has put the link in the. Oh, he shared it with me privately. I'm going to share that with people publicly so people can see for themselves. Again, these are all still shirt-sizey kinds of things where the estimates are still rough, but they represent our best thinking at the time given what we knew about what we were getting into.
Greg, you'll have to change that document to an open document.
Okay.
I just did that.
Okay.
Or now I just did that.
Cool.
Gotcha.
Cool. We wanted to share it with the community once we had it in a little better shape. But I think now it's time for people to see. Now, the important point is that basically this hasn't been reviewed by DOOR at all. Now let's compare that with the proposal that DOOR has put on the table, which is an order of magnitude below what's being proposed. And here you go. Here's the corresponding budgeting document. What we're seeing is what is fairly common here, that DOOR hasn't been able to absorb the reality of what it takes to build software, and is even unable to calculate what dev and overhead would cost in this particular setting. So from my point of view, that's the first red flag with respect to whether or not we have someone who's going to be able to provide the kind of management that is necessary in order to bring this project to success. I think we've seen some other red flags. So the other red flags are pretty clear. I think most everyone here was privy to what happened with Ian, who was a longtime supporter of Synereo, that DOOR has alienated. I think you're beginning to see that the relationships between DOOR and me were quite strained. I think it's very fair to say that the relationships between Andy and DOOR were quite strained. So the only people who remain, I believe that Ed has stated. Ed, are you willing to continue working with DOOR?
The short answer is no.
Okay, that's all I need.
And are you willing to continue working with Greg?
Well, it depends on the capacity and role, but yes is the short answer.
So I think we have a clear indication. The only people left on the team are people who've been working with DOOR, with the exception of Andy seems to have rejoined, but who've been working with DOOR for a very short period of time. I think if we look carefully, we see a number of other problems. The Project 11 is another example where we have 300 project proposal submissions that have languished and not gone through because there's been no response. At this point, I think the best thing to do, and I really didn't want to get to this point, I tried desperately to get to this point. The best thing to do would be for DOOR to step down as a manager from a management role in Synereo and have some mentorship or guidance so that he can get to a proper management role and learn how software is developed and learn what the risks are and how it works, and help with the strategy for the cryptocurrency, which I think Dor is quite good at. So I don't want Dor to leave Synereo. I think there's a win, but for Synereo to deliver to its investors, the right thing is for Dor to step down. This will enable the RChain effort to be appropriately funded and appropriately managed. And by the way, just to be clear, I have zero interest in being a manager. If you talk with any of the dev team, or even if you talk with Ed, you'll see that I have zero interest in being a manager, and I work with everyone in a roundtable fashion. Everyone has been able to see everything that I have done. I have been completely transparent. And I certainly I'm more than happy to own all of the mistakes I have made, especially with respect to time estimates and wall clock calendar estimates. But I have zero interest in taking over the company. What I want is that Synereo has proper management in place. I think Ed was a model manager. I'm sorry that Ed doesn't want to continue working with Synereo, but I think Ed was a model manager in terms of being able to sort of provide the kind of team building and other things, and the dev team really flourished with Ed's engagement and the dev team really flourished with Ed's with Ed's engagement in a managerial role. And I think.
Thank you.
Of course, no. Well, I'm only stating what I believe to be true. So let's see. Can you see the documents now? Can everyone see the documents? Yeah. Yeah. I hear you, Trump country. So I think what I really want to have happen is for Synereo to succeed. I want the investors to receive the value that they were promised. And I'm more than happy to go through with anyone what I see the value propositions are, and to relate them to the tech, relate them to all of the actual management and resourcing that has been done and has been done for months by people who know how to manage software, and to relate that to funding events and investment events. And so now what I think needs to happen is that this information becomes spread far and wide for the investors. I think people need to know what's going on. They need to understand. So are you unable to see the documents here, John?
Okay, I see.
Okay, cool, great.
Thanks.
Sure, no worries. I mean, I think you saw the spreadsheets from before. This shouldn't be surprise information to you. They've been shared sort of internally. They need to be reviewed. I think also, one of the things that was clear with Dor's counter proposal was that he's either he doesn't understand how how software is developed, or he's making a sort of underhanded comment about essentially wanting to starve the effort to the point where it's not possible to meet the already ambitious timelines. The other thing that's super important to understand is that the timelines that we proposed have been blown out of the water by about 2.5 months. I have been working desperately to try to keep them on track using just resources that happen to be lying around. But because of the lack of responsiveness from Dor on a number of different issues, the timelines have been blown by at least 2.5 months. Additionally, I need the community to know that I have been discussing with Dor the potential for the problems that we're facing now for the last 6 months. And I am very disheartened to say that that Dor was completely unresponsive with respect to this, giving lip service to one position and then changing his position, and then giving written lip service to one position and then changing his position. For me, there are specific things that could have prevented this. First of all, we needed to have a different kind of management structure, and I could see that way back when. I could see that we didn't have the right kind of management expertise in place, and that needed to shift. It was becoming clear to me about 6 months ago. So as many people have seen, I crafted the managing partner proposal as a way to ease us into a better management that was both more in alignment with the stated goals of the company, but also would provide a place for a manager who has expertise with software to step in and do the proper job.
Sorry for interrupting. Just 1 minute, Greg. I'm sorry for interrupting. I feel like as if I'm trying to kind of note the topics in the flow to be able to get some feedback to address those, because I guess the purpose of this meeting is not like to just share like a whole bunch of accusations and then close it. I guess we need some kind of discussion here, and I think it's pretty.
There'll be a place for discussion. I'm sure we'll have that. We'll have that shortly. I appreciate your.
So I'm not sure. Let's say I'm not able to follow everything and be able to get the discussion matching all the topics that were given here. Maybe you want to go one topic by another.
No, I'm not going to go depth first. I'm going to go breadth first, and then we can go depth. Then we can go into depth on each of the topics. So I'm touching on the top level issues, and then after the list of the top level issues, we can go deeper into those.
Okay. Don't you want to hear? I don't know. Dor, do you have anything to say about something that was said up until now? Because honestly, I really
again, Yaniv, thank you very much. I've called the meeting, and I'm going to run the meeting, and after that, I'm more than happy to hear feedback. What's important to me at this point is that investors know what's going on. The fact that there has been this desire to keep this hidden is very, very much against my goes against my grain, and I've said as repeatedly. In August, there was a very heated meeting with Dor and Ed and I, in which I said it is irresponsible to take money from investors without resolving these issues, and we are going to have to come clean about this. So we have to come clean now, because I cannot abide by what's gone on. It is not in good conscience. And so that's what's going on here. I am providing people with the information that they need in order to make determinations for themselves as to where they see the value, what they see the value in, and what they think is the right approach going forward. But this is absolutely no longer can be the case that these things can remain behind closed doors.
And I think it can't. I don't think we can move on with the discussion without like discussing even that tiny topic you just mentioned here, because that is a very severe accusation.
Actually, we can, and I'm going to. So we're going to move on, and I will complete the list of topics.
But you know, something very. First of all, something very.
I I need to just complete the topics, and then you'll have plenty of time. Okay. So if you don't mind, I will just complete the list of topics.
I don't know how to listen to that, honestly, because I think we're spreading fear.
I'm not spreading any fear. I'm trying to get people apprised so that they can be responsible. That's what's important here. Okay, so what's important to me is that everyone understand that the next level of risk has to do with the legal risk to the company regarding the token, the AMP token. The AMP token needs to have utility in order to be more securely passing the Howey test.
So just a short interruption. I think it's important to note that Yaniv was kicked out of the meeting by its host.
I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm not the host.
I'm happy to let him continue. I did not share Yaniv's opinion. I'm happy to continue speaking. I just wanted to make it clear that Yaniv did not stop speaking. You kicked him from the channel.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to mute everyone until Greg gets done so that he does get through this.
Thank you. Thank you. So there is a legal risk to the company if the token doesn't achieve utility. So if we look very, very carefully, the blockchain that exists today is not going to be able to allow it to have the kind of utility even at reasonable, even at sort of semi-reasonable scales that we have been talking about. No, there is no model that I have been able to come up with that is convincing, where the AMP token has utility on the Omni blockchain, unless what we're saying is that Synereo is a toy and was never intended to provide the functionality at the scale that we have been talking about in all our documents. So in this regard, some kind of scalable solution is required in order for the token to have utility. The RChain proposal represents not only my best thinking, but the best thinking that I have gotten from consultation with Vlad Zamfir and Vitalik and Ethan Buckman and many, many other people in the space. And I have I came to that architecture quite begrudgingly. I did not want to be able to. I did not want to have to take on that kind of scope and scale. But as we began to understand more and more of the requirements of the offering that we proposed, that's the architecture that popped out of the requirements. And I have been super clear with the entire community about this. I have said the same words over and over and over again. And I have looked to the community and anyone who's paying attention to provide feedback otherwise. So without an architecture like that, the AMP has very little utility. And so now we come to the nub of the matter. The nub of the matter is that if there isn't a good relationship between Synereo and RChain, there is no ability to do the conversion event from the AMP token to the RChain tokens. And as a result, Synereo is once again at legal risk. So let me summarize then. DOR has known that there are issues with respect to the leadership team and has deferred and delayed resolving those issues. And that has put us in the place where we are now. We didn't even get to mediation until September after the crowd sale. So this is a matter of fact, which is documented by the statements of work signed with the mediator. The the budgeting proposal that DOR has countered with after months and months of delay on this kind of thing is far short of the mark, doesn't reflect any sort of realistic point of view on this, and most importantly, doesn't reflect the budgeting effort that was done by Ed and myself and other members of the team. And also doesn't reflect the important point, which is that with the right kind of budgeting, we can go and get the sort of investment that will be required in order to bring the product to market. DOR has alienated virtually everyone he has worked with, including myself. DOR has let the Project 11 languish. So now there are 300 submissions that have been languishing for months. I can't allow this to continue. The best thing for Synereo is to deliver what it promised the community, and that is the RChain architecture and the social app on top of it. And the best way to do that is to help DOR into a role where he can flourish and be successful, and get him out of the role of management. And so I am concluding. So these are my concluding statements here, and then I'll open up the floor. I have summarized what's been said, what I believe to be the events, and my assessment of the events. I feel my obligation to the company, my legally bound behavior, is to let investors and stakeholders know what I see to be the issues, and to make positive recommendations. So I have executed those to the best of my ability, and now I will open up the floor for discussion.
I'll be happy to say a few words. I mean, I'm sad that we're at this point. We, certainly tried through mediation, tried to explore a number of, options that I think a number of options on the table would have been better outcomes than coming to this. So I feel sad that we're here. Greg, could you be clear about whether you approved the Bank to the Future campaign or not, and when?
I tacitly consented, and of course I had to sign some documents. This was under the assumption that DOR would keep his word with respect to the management structure that he gave both verbally and then indicated in writing.
So just a factual clarification: the agreement to go into the Bank to the Future campaign was given at the beginning of January, and that was because the first deadline given by Greg for the alpha was beginning of February of this year, 2016. And so he gave his agreement to go into the Bank to the Future campaign, and then also, of course, recorded himself being interviewed for it and supported the campaign from that time and going forward.
So that everyone is aware, we did not have to go to the sale in September, and that is the important event that we're talking about. We could have easily not held the sale. I consented to the September 19th sale under the assumption that we were going to go forward with the agreements that we established in August.
So No,
We would have, of course, not gone into the sale, but then there would not be a scenario because we would not have funding and there would be no salaries to give out.
Actually, this is another point. The bulk of the development and certainly the bulk of my time has been paid for by other parties, not Synereo.
So I'm glad you brought that up because it's important for the people here to know that that is a breach of both our founders agreement and your consultation agreement with Synereo.
As long as, which you knew about for the last 2 years.
Yes, I knew about it and told you that it's not acceptable while offering you to receive payment from Synereo.
You never.
It's actually a relatively minor point compared
Actually, it's not a minor point. The important thing here is that Synereo has benefited greatly from funds from other parties. And so other parties have been footing the bill for Synereo development.
So how has Synereo benefited from those funds?
Synereo has published a document to the community, the strength of which, on the strength of which it went to the public for crowd sale funding. And the results that contained in those documents were funded by other efforts.
I think you're overestimating the impact of the architecture document specifically, but even that was not created by you, as you said earlier, right? You're not the first author. It was mostly created by Ed while he was working for Synereo, as well as Jeff, another Synereo employee.
Actually, Ed was not under contract, as you know, and has never been under contract, as you know.
He had an SOW with Synereo, and there was an implication of an agreement.
He did not sign the contract and refused to sign the contract.
And did you have an SOW with Synereo at the time?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact timing, but yeah, there were two SOWs, if I remember. There was one that was a simple SOW that we did co-sign. I don't remember if I started work on the architecture document during that time period or not. I'd have to check. And then there was a second SOW that we explored that was not signed, or the independent contractor agreement that was not signed.
And Ed, did the line items on the first SOW that you signed include the architecture document?
No.
That's right.
Guys, I feel like at this point there are probably hundreds of points that can be discussed and contested on a tactical level. Given the introduction that Greg has given, I feel that it'll be right of me to share sort of the full view from my point of view as a person who has been, to some extent, part of Synereo in different functions from the very beginning. For those who don't know who and what I am, my name is Andy. I was the second original co-founder with DOR, and I am the single largest stakeholder and AMP holder outside of the two founders. Now, I had a different, larger equity stake and function until after the AMP sale. Now, I am going to skip a lot of the things that have happened afterwards, but the reason why I'm here is I feel like I can provide a view that sort of encompasses all the performance of the various stakeholders in Synereo along the way, at least from over here. Where should I start? So first of all, DOR is, at least for myself on a personal level, is very hard to work with. I agree with that assessment. I know that DOR is not happy with my assessment, but that is true. It's been very, very hard for me to work with DOR on a daily basis, and this is one of the reasons why I felt comfortable with reducing my function in Synereo from a founder position to my position, which does not include direct accountability for functions within Synereo. However, from a performance standpoint, when we are discussing a function of a startup CEO, and the function of a startup CEO is mainly securing funding, securing business deals, and ensuring that the startup continues to exist through grit, through making sure that you just keep going. When you don't have funds, when you have issues with your founders, when you have issues with your employees. And I think that Dor, with all his faults, has ridiculously over-delivered given the funds and interfaces he had to work with. And I'll explain. Synereo does not have users. It does not have traction. It does not have a publicly available product. However, Dor managed to keep this project afloat through a series of partnerships and various other actions that got us to this point. And that includes marketing, partnerships, and even the interface with Greg. So I don't think it is the function of the CEO to manage software development. I don't even think that Greg would enjoy being managed by a person who will be accountable for software development. A CEO should not be managing that specific process. So I don't think that Dor has to be a software developer or a person capable of managing software development in order to be a successful CEO of a startup. And as mentioned, in terms of being a CEO of a startup, I feel like he has been very successful in his function. Now, as to other functions of Synereo, as you probably know, there is no CMO, there is no CFO, there is no COO who would manage various, let's say, things related to budgets, payments, office space, so on and so forth. And Greg functions as CTO, meaning all other executive functions fall on Dor. And I agree that that created a lot of bottlenecks. As anyone who interfaces with Dor knows, it is hard to get a response. I do believe that one of the reasons why it is so hard to get a response is also the reason why we got so far. It's because we don't have the full executive team. We do not pay to a bunch of executives to manage those functions, and regretfully, they get all funneled down to Dor. While Greg is accountable for Synereo's technology. Now, it is my understanding that Greg has been given freedom to operate within that area of responsibility, in part due to the fact that Dor is not a technological leader. Greg has been given enough freedom and is accountable for whatever technological deliverables Synereo is supposed to provide. Now, I'm talking specifically technological deliverables because, and this is something that I mentioned to Greg at the time, that documents and PDFs and plans are not meaningful deliverables. I don't expect, I don't measure Dor's performance, but his ability to put together a business plan or a nice brochure or a pitch. And in the same way, I don't think technology is measured by its specs or ideas or plans. It all comes down to what the team manages to deliver and whether it's usable and how many people are using it. Having said that, myself, Dor, and another founder, Yuval, have all engaged Greg based on the understanding that Greg is bringing with himself a special K, a unique stack that has been he has received an investment, if I remember correctly, 2.9 or 3.2, a figure that we have stated multiple times in the community and on various forums. A stack that has been invested in, and Greg is bringing with himself a functioning technological stack that can be used to deliver decentralized apps. We are now 2 years into the project. We have engaged partners, investors, and each other based on the existence of the functioning decentralized application development stack. This is not the future. This is how we got up to this point. And let's just say, I'm not sure that based on the feedback that I received and what I'm hearing, we basically have to not only abandon it, but we have to state that it's not functioning. Yes, Ed, you would like to say something? No? Okay. So this is my point of view. Thank you for listening.
I really appreciate you giving that point of view, Andy. Thank you very much. The special case stack has from the very beginning, as mentioned in the white paper, is only the content delivery, not the blockchain. And it is important that those two be distinguished. The special case stack was in production use in Pertunity for 2 years, over 2 years. So these are again all documented facts, and you can easily see that what I provided was what I said I would provide. What we are moving into now is a different area where we are adding features to the stack that have to do with deployment in a different setting. We did not have the technical staff to get this done, and we wanted to make sure that we engaged the technical staff in doing this so that we had a technical culture that would scale. These are the explanations for why we are here and what we are doing. We have added features. We have the marketplace has changed. When Special K was delivered, that was in 2013. Docker didn't exist. We now have Special K embedded in Docker, and we have a team that knows how to do this and how to manage this, and has the equivalent of a release process wrapped around this and a testing process wrapped around this. All of that is exactly part of what is necessary to deliver software at scale. So while I take your points, I think they're not at the level of technical detail, and they elide several things, which are clearly laid out from the very beginning in the Synereo white paper. Now, I will absolutely own up that Special K is rough around the edges. There are definitely places where it could be improved, but I don't want to, and I have said this before, I don't want to spend any more time investing in the Scala stack, not because it's something that doesn't work or can't be made to work or can't be improved, but because there are more cost-effective ways to do this that allow us to go after a much better architecture. What we discovered after looking at this for several months was that the content delivery network needed to be merged with the blockchain network in order to have the kind of technology that we wanted. So we all agreed at the beginning, Yuval, Andy, Dor, myself, we all agreed that a side-by-side architecture would be something that we could that we could live with for a while. But then as we looked into the requirements further, we changed that decision. So that is the reality on the ground. That decision was changed. And I, after looking at it carefully, could not support utilizing the side-by-side architecture from the point of view of economic security.
Understood. Greg.
So these are all a lot of words, but there's a very fine point here that has to be very clearly understood. Greg joined the project claiming that he had a working, decentralized technological stack. He said that he had a content delivery network. He said that he had a working smart contracting system.
And it does.
We've published a roadmap in April of 2015, a year and a half ago, saying that with a minimal amount of money, $100,000, we would get to the point where it would be operational and that developers would be able to interface with it and build their applications on top of it. We are now 2 years later. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on that stack, and we still do not have a functioning decentralized network, let alone a social network built on top of it. So all of these claims about needing an extra blockchain and so on, that's fine. It's entirely possible that the special case stack and the accompanying technical components wouldn't serve to scale beyond the 1 million users Greg initially promised it would support, or actually 10 million users, I don't recall exactly. But for the past 2 years, he has not shown that he's able to deliver any piece of functioning code. He came to us months ago, at the beginning of this year, and told us that Special K, in order to run, so that the node software is available and people can download it and connect amongst one another, needs one line of code to be changed, one line of configuration. Since then, we've had our top developers working on this day and night, creating tests, trying to figure this out, fixing bug after bug. And at this point, and I wish they were here to provide their own testimony on this, they don't think that it's ever going to work. So I urge everyone who's listening to this conversation to hear everything that's being said with this perspective. Greg has not been able to deliver anything for the past 2 years. What he's trying to do here now is wash this failure away from him under the guise of blaming everyone else but himself and run off starting a new project.
Oh, this is hilarious. So
Is there anything you or anyone else can say to refute the facts that I just laid out?
First of all,
do we have any working product? Do we have a social network? Do we have node software? Do we have any network that's able to connect?
Jim,
Do we have users? Do we have developers who are able to develop against special?
Jim, are you able to stand up nodes?
Absolutely. We have a public node running right now.
When you stand up a node on your machine and connect to another node, it's called a server. It's not a centralized network.
Actually, we demonstrated to Yaniv the multi-node configuration as well.
Absolutely. If you in the history of the Docker channel somewhere, you'll see where there were many nodes set up communicating. And we're in a situation today where either Greg builds RChain or he fixes the prototype. A lot of requirements came out, and the prototype was extremely valuable, and it still is. We still can write social contracts on it. We still can stand up prototypes for the things we want to put on the RChain to some extent.
Guys, we're again reverting to a state where there's like 100 different things that can be contested by the people on this meeting. I really don't think it's the right thing to do. Like literally, there's like
Actually-
100 points and like
Actually, no. I'm sorry. I'm not going to allow to commandeer the conversation. The reality is, Door made several different claims, and again didn't use careful language. I absolutely own up that there are lots and lots of bugs in Special K. I have said that from the beginning. I said that from the very beginning. You can go back to the Hangouts from 2014 and absolutely.
About the bugs, we don't have the feature. We don't have.
Actually, no. That we do. We do.
You mentioned my name. I want to react.
Actually, we do have the features, and they are being rolled out step by step. The thing that you are talking about.
I want to react, please. You mentioned my name. I think I'd like to relate to that. I'd like not to be kicked out of this session, please, for trying to react. It's okay with you guys. It's Special K has its issues, and the session that we were seeing together, Henry setting up some pieces of code and running it, I don't consider that to be getting Special K up and running for the web application we were trying to build. And I think it's something that should have been discussed internally, and opening that up to the community over here is something very irresponsible for the community. We all put, you guys put much more energy into this. Like, I'm relatively new here, and I appreciate the open spirit we have over here and the transparency. It should be that way, but we should always also be accountable for what we communicate. This public debate I find it irresponsible. It should have been discussed internally, and you had a chance to talk with Door, and wait with that discussion for several more days to go over that negotiations you had. But apparently all that was a show. It seems like what you wanted was just having that opportunity of just pulling it out there as if you're saving something. But I just find it irresponsible. And honestly, wait, let me finish. And honestly, I don't know of any other company or startup or whatever organization that would let someone from the organization just set a conference, a press conference, and just say irresponsible stuff that he can't stand behind them, and not putting it into a reasonable, let's say, debate or reasonable discussion, just saying out loud without having to stand behind it. That's pretty liberal. That's pretty impressive, I might have to say. But I really feel as if it was to respect the community and it was to respect the time that everybody put into this discussion should have been worked over internally and come up with the community with the realization of what we want to do from here. What's happening now is just causing a lot of confusion, because people need to decide whom to believe upon very little information they have, and that's like. That turns into I don't know, very cheap politics.
Actually, so thank you, Yaniv. I appreciate your comments.
Not appreciated.
No, I really.
You're not appreciating it because if you did, you would respect the call we just had like an hour ago, where we were talking, the three of us with Andy, four of us, and we're trying to go into some kind of practical understanding of where you and Door actually meet. And apparently all that was a show. We were just pulling up some more time to just.
Yaniv, now you're repeating yourself, and so I've heard your points, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I really do.
It seems like for at least 6 months we've been putting this off a couple more hours till things get worked out.
Right. So what's crucial to me is for people to understand that I have been attempting to resolve these issues with Door since before August.
Likewise, I've been attempting to solve them as well.
No, you haven't. You have been delayed.
Yes, I have. I mean, you've repeated.
So what is the solution? What is the solution that we've come to? What can we expect of Synereo moving forward?
We were making a proposal in
here's-
which Greg separates into an RChain entity that he can govern in any way he sees fit. And we were negotiating this. We were hoping to negotiate it in
And
such
I
a way
have-
that we come out to the community
what
with
is
something
important-
final instead of just having
what-
this
what is
out of the open, as Yaniv described, just
what
random
is
bits of
important-
information flying around without anyone being able to make sense out of anything, essentially destroying the project.
What is important to understand is that the resourcing for RChain and all of the work that has gone into the resourcing for RChain was done months ago. And Dora's proposal ignores all of that work and is completely unilateral and is unrealistic and is very much in concert or in alignment with what I have said before, that Dora doesn't have the chops to know how to budget for a software development effort.
I want to be clear that the proposal that Greg has been presented with has been reviewed and accepted by the entire core team of Synereo, 10 different people, and that only Greg thinks this way. Only he thinks that it's not enough. He wants more money. He wants his first proposal to me actually had him request more money than Synereo had to finance.
Ed, do you think it is budgeted appropriately does it match the budgeting that you and I did for RChain?
Well, I'm not on the core team, so I think Dor was not including me in his previous statement. But no, it's not enough funding. RChain would need more sources of funding to get it done.
And so specifically, I just spoke with last night. I spoke with Gary and Henry. I'm sorry that they're not on the call, but they conferred to me that it's certainly not sufficient even to pay their salaries, or not the salaries that they would need in order to do the kind of work necessary for RChain. So Dor's claims are false.
This is listed, it says 300,000 for the first 6 months. What are Synereo's expenses going to be? How is the rest being spent? If 300,000 isn't enough, what's being given to other people and why?
So that isn't again. So let's talk about that. Let's consider just dev alone, and this is why I provided the other budgeting spreadsheet so you could compare. Just dev alone, 3 dev who are operating at the level where they can meet the ambitious timelines that we've already blown would need 150K each. And they would need to see, in order to commit to a year's time, they would need to see 450K in the bank before they would take such a gig. So that's already well past what Dor has. And that doesn't include setting the money to set up RChain, the money to set up a website, the money to do any sort of business development or marketing for RChain.
I think you're missing the point, and explaining to address this proposal.
Again,
Greg is leaving Synereo because he does not want to work on the published dev plan or build his own entity that's under his control after not being able to deliver on the technology that he promised.
No, actually
had working when he joined the project.
Okay, Dor, this is false. What I want to do is to make sure that Synereo does march to the published dev plan.
Well, you said yourself that you don't want, or at least are unable to support the social network that was supposed to be created, and the technology that
that's also completely false. What I have said again and again and again is that the special case stack will allow us to develop the user interface and get requirements.
That was a retcon that you only went into 6 months ago. When you joined the project, you made very, very clear assurances. We published them on the Hangouts. We talked about them in the interviews.
Again, you and I in January agreed that it was better not to have our own separate chain, and it took us until April before we were finally willing to say it.
It's a decent organic brand, but I don't think.
I don't know who that was, but what's important here is to recognize that I want Synereo to succeed. I want there to be a social network. I have repeatedly said to Ed and to other investors that the right way to build RChain is to have it constrained by applications. That this is the opposite, this is the appropriate way to do it, as opposed to Ethereum, where it was platform first. I want to build the platform in tandem with two reasonable applications so that the platform doesn't suffer feature creep, which would be very easy to do. I believe this is responsible, and I believe it's the right thing to do. The only way to get that done, exactly, use case driven infrastructure, that is precisely the point. So RChain is terrifically ambitious, but unfortunately, we have to be even more ambitious to be responsible, which is to make sure that there's an application driving it. I am 100%, 110% committed to providing that application. And I will say it again and again and again, despite Door's false claims.
Yeah,
Which claim did I make?
we have to build RChain, and as a community, we have to help Greg get the development resources he needs to get it done.
Well, since it was on the strength of my reputation, on the strength of my work, and on the strength of the architecture document that was presented to investors, we've raised $7 million. We don't need to go much further than to utilize those resources. And with those resources appropriately allocated, I can go to an additional investor and get it funded the rest of the way.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that point of the argument. Moving forward in terms of features, I mean, the social platform has been propounded repeatedly in the community as being an okay, as an okay app. But it's a blockchain application, right? And in large, the RChain infrastructure and Rolang and RoVM have attracted a lot more attention than a social app. So are we saying now that we're no longer supporting building a blockchain solution and that we're just doing a social app? Or and now I get that, like, there are two separate legal entities.
No, definitely not saying that. And there's a lot of this that's still not concluded, Joseph. I think let's just take a breather here to say that it's very ambitious what we are all building and have on the roadmap. We don't know the exact amount, but we know it's a very large amount of money that it's going to require to build out RChain, to build out a Synereo social platform and layer. And I'll throw in LivelyGig in the mix is also another ambitious project. One of Greg's points was that without use cases that are driving RChain and without sort of end-to-end functionality being demonstrated, RChain might become completely technology-driven, which would be setting up for feature creep and all kinds of other issues. I think it is an open question to me, in my mind, whether the Synereo social product should continue evolving past where it is today until RChain is ready. And that's a budget allocation question. I asked myself the same question about LivelyGig, by the way, because Special K isn't completely in place and production ready from my viewpoint. I have to ask myself that question. But also, just as a matter of focus, if we are optimizing for an end-to-end use case on RChain, then the budget would be spent one way. If we're trying to balance instead of gathering the best user experience feedback on the social product and engaging the community and doing RChain, then the budget allocation looks different. But so I think these are difficult decisions to make, but it has to be conscious. And I think we're now at the point with Synereo having raised the money, how to spend it, both in terms of governance, but just even in terms of allocation. And Greg's one of Greg's point was that the allocation to RChain in the proposal from Door is not enough to make RChain successful.
Right, right. And I'm glad you brought up the governance point of view, because I have been attempting to drive appropriate governance, appropriate responsibility to the community. Everyone knows that I tried to get that conversation at least framed in September, right? And that's what I'm hoping that we can do here, is to begin to understand just how important that governance is. Because right now we're in a situation where Door believes he should operate without oversight.
No, that's not true. I was perfectly happy with the structure, the governance structure that we had in place. You're the one who kept taking more and more control and exercising power when things didn't go your way. And it's
I don't have any power here, Door.
It's culminating now. In this attempt to put pressure on me from the community to step down.
I have zero power here.
Or for you to step out of Synereo and set up your own entity that you control, that you can control in any way that you see fit.
Absolutely.
I'm
going to ask you now. I'm going to ask you now to stop.
Because he doesn't want to work with the Synereo team on the dev roadmap that we published.
Okay, this is false.
To run away.
Can we stop talking over each other? It's really kind of crazy to see this happen.
I absolutely agree. I can't.
I'm trying to make a point, and Greg is interrupting me. I mean, he's been speaking for a while. I'm trying to make a very simple point.
Which is false.
That may be, but it's my point, and I'm going to make it. And perhaps other people may have different opinions about whether it's false.
No, you just made a claim about me that is false.
I think the one thing we know is that Door and Greg cannot work together, and we have to arrange the situation so that they do not have to work together.
Yes, and this is, I feel, this is the nature of a proposal. Like, in case you haven't seen it or reviewed it or seen the link, I would like to revert back to the core issues that Greg started with, which is governance and functions within Synereo and RChain. And due to the fact that we have a large enough forum here that has both members of community, developers, so on and so forth, I would like to hear both your comments on whether we can proceed with a governance structure where Greg will be fully accountable and the leader of the RChain entity, which will be set up in any kind of corporate structure or jurisdiction as you see fit, Greg, which will be funded by Synereo. The funding will be not set in stone. It will simply only begin with that milestone, with the $300,000. It is my opinion that Synereo in itself should be mostly a technological project, right? So out of the 4.7 million that we've received, obviously we have a fraction of that at the moment, but most of that money should be allocated to developing technology, simply due to the nature of what Synereo is and what it should deliver. So all of that money is supposed to go to technology anyway, right? I feel like what we're doing with the proposal we have, where we basically making RChain a separate entity, we are reducing the friction between Door and yourself, and we're allowing both Door and yourself to focus on the functions that you both excel in. I have to switch meeting rooms. I'll be back.
If there were a governance structure in place, this would be ideal. As long as Door remains the CEO of Synereo and Synereo is in charge of funding RChain, this is an unacceptable solution. I think anyone can see the problems here. If there's a governance structure to which RChain and Synereo are accountable, And from my point of view, the only proper thing is that governance structure is from the community. Then it begins to be a reasonable thing. I have never, and I want to repeat this, I have never been interested in having any sort of control. If you look, even with the developers, what you will find is that largely they're in charge of the code base. I come in to help out. I'm someone who helps. I'm not someone who controls. I'm not interested in controlling anything here.
Well then, and I mean that makes total sense, quite frankly. If it takes separation of duties to ensure that Special K is working, one, as was supposedly promised, and that DOOR functions as an effective CEO with other members around it, so that everyone can fulfill their functions without talking to each other. And Greg, you can take a non-managerial position. What's more, like, I guess in less words, what's your opposition to an agreement like this?
Again, the opposition to the agreement is, one, it's not properly funded. The proposal ignores all of the data and all of the work that was put into the resourcing and funding that was developed by Ed and myself and other members of the team. Two, the proposal doesn't pass muster from the point of view of the people who have experience and know this. DOOR has continued to make facetious claims about whether or not it passes muster, and continues to make false claims. And this is why I cannot have him in a CEO style role. I don't want to be in that role. I think if someone wants to be in an operational or managerial role, that would be great. But it should not be DOOR, and it should not be someone who continues to make these kinds of claims.
Well, that's not your choice to make, because I am the founder and the CEO of this company, and it's your choice to split off and create another company. And while you may think that funding that you get based on the initial milestones, or even those later on when you get more funds upon reaching those milestones, may not be enough, I think it's the only responsible structure to put you in, seeing as you have not delivered any working technology to date. So I think the proposal that we're giving you is very, very generous.
Okay, DOOR, I am absolutely not going to allow you to say I'm not going to allow you to say that I have delivered in a recording that is going to be published and in a forum that I have not delivered any working.
You just said that you don't want to control anything, yet you won't even let me finish a sentence.
You can finish your sentences. Do not make.
I can finish my sentence only when you allow me to.
Do not make false claims like this. It's not healthy.
It's not a false claim. We do not have working technology. I really wish we had the developers on board, but what we do have is Ed, who was the technical program manager, and we have Yaniv, who's the current technical program manager, and they can both attest that Special K, the tech stack that we use right now, cannot underlie a decentralized application. So to return to my point, I think the offer that Synereo made for you, a founder who wants to split off and create his own new company, is more than generous. It allows you to set up and bootstrap RChain, and if it succeeds, you can receive more funding. Also, it lets you use the brand and language and everything that has been developed in Synereo in that new company, and also allow you to accept support and funding from other projects. You said yourself that RChain should be something that doesn't belong to Synereo. You want to have other coins as native currencies. And so the offer that we made, and it's publicly available now, someone posted it here on the chat, paves the path for this. If other people or other projects believe in you, they can support you. Synereo is not going to let you get more funds than the minimum that would be necessary to reach the initial milestones. And if and only if you actually deliver working code, which is something very, very few of us on the team have any faith in at the moment, then you will be able to continue. Now, I want to make this very clear. Synereo without Greg can continue moving on as planned. It retains all of the IP, all of the knowledge that's been created. We still have a developer team. We have a full team of professionals in place. We have replacement CTOs that are available. We've already interviewed people who can step in as soon as Greg leaves. And we're going to continue doing our best to deliver on our promises, whether or not RChain exists and whether or not Greg wishes to collaborate with us.
Who do you think is on the development team? Just name the names of the people who are on the development team.
I think we have, a real problem here we have to face,
So the people on the development team right now,
projects require
Henry,
$1 million a year.
So you're saying Yaniv is a developer?
No, you asked who's on the developer team, and I said Yaniv, Henry, Gary, and Julia.
All right. And with that team, you're going to deliver. So I think this is really, I think this is what the community needs to see in terms of Door's management style, right? So what we've just seen is that Door thinks that he is going to be able to deliver on these kinds of applications with that sort of team. No, I'm sorry.
We have the full resources to expand the team. We have a good brand, even though we've been managing it with passion. We have the resources and we have the connections, and so we can get the talent that's required to deliver on our vision. And I can tell you that if you look at what we have right now, CTO who has not been able to deliver even the technology that he claimed was already working. And on the other hand, we have a team of hardworking developers, and we have the funds to attract more talent, people who have actually delivered, who have a record of doing. Then yes, we have a very good chance of continuing, a much better chance than with someone who has not shown that he's ever been able to deliver working code.
Okay, so let's go back through that claim a little bit more carefully. So do you know the Microsoft project called BizTalk Process Orchestration? Do you know that was utilized to deliver UK tax return solution?
I don't know what you did for Microsoft. All I know is what I've seen in Synereo. I know what I've heard from the developers in Synereo working with you. I know their impressions of your work, and I know their impressions of your developing abilities. I know they don't think you can code, and I know they don't believe in your ability to deliver. That's what I know. That's why I think it's not responsible for Synereo to fund an even more ambitious effort.
That's awesome, dude. That is so awesome. So
you haven't been able to deliver the technology that was supposedly already working, and now you want to do something that's an order of magnitude more ambitious.
This is great. So we're going to bring Henry on here, and he's going to say that I don't know how to code. Really? That's what you just said.
Please,
so
please do. Please ask the developers.
Yeah, of course. Let's bring on Henry and Gary and see if they say.
All you have to do is ask permission from Gary to post the emails that he sent to you and the team about his conception of.
Oh, absolutely.
Is the development team intentionally staying out of this conversation?
Yes, because they hate this kind of politics. But in point of fact, Gary and Henry and I have productive sessions all the time. And they frequently come to me and ask me to code with them.
If we're not spending money on RChain and developing the tech stack, where's the money being spent?
That's a great question.
It's going to be spent on creating working technology and applications.
Which is as of this moment, what are what is that? The social app?
Can I please answer that? So, Joseph, that's a good question. And to the best of my understanding, RChain is not a product at the moment. It is a plan, right? It's an outline, it's a PDF, it's a definition, it's a plan.
Oh, no, sorry. There's a lot more to it than that. Just today, I published the working VM target for the Rolang. So that's now, so the VM with spec and running code, which, by the way, that code base has been utilized to deliver ATM network management for NCR, Sumitomo. The same code base has been used to deliver data cleaning applications for Belcore and data integration applications for Eastman Chemical. So there's more. So there's a lot more to delivering functioning code here than what in terms of what Dor was saying about me. But I've just posted the traces from the VM, including the decompile from various expressions to show that the concurrency mechanism working and functioning. So again, these claims that it's just a spec are completely false. And the claims that I don't deliver working code are completely false. The claims that the developers don't think I can code are completely false. I don't know how much more complete falsehoods the community needs from Dor to say that Dor can't be in a management role.
So again, I'm not going to argue, and let's go to this point of governance and management role. So that setup where you would have a separate funded entity that you are welcome to govern, manage, or not manage in any cooperative or collaborative manner that you see fit, which is initially funded and bootstrapped by Synereo with not insignificant funding. And that entity is open to additional investors. While the interface between yourself and Dor is minimized, as is the dependency. What's basically the core to the resistance to that sort of setup?
So there are two issues. First of all, I have spent 2 years of my time and my own reputation and a lot of other things making the Synereo brand. I'm simply not going to allow someone who doesn't know how to manage and who has alienated so many people.
Not going to allow? Greg, that's a very ego management power statement, with all due respect.
Okay, fair enough. So I'll take that on board. I hear what you're saying. It doesn't fit with conscience for me to say that it is okay. It is not okay from.
He's not proposing that Dor fill all the CO the officer roles that he's been following.
No. I think all I'm saying is that Dor, based upon the behavior that we've seen today, where Dor has repeatedly stated in front of people falsifiable claims in order to try to, I don't even know what he's trying to do. This is in conjunction with all the other behavior that we've seen. Dor cannot be the chief executive officer of Synereo.
Legally, can Dor be
is odd gap here.
chief executive officer
He can
of
be whatever
Synereo?
he wants to be. He's a grown-up. He can be whatever he chooses to be. He's a grown-up human being.
Not in a situation where we have this co-founder situation. There are two voices here. There's no governance model, and we need a.
There will be.
I hope that there's going to be a governance model, but there needed to be a governance model long before this, and that needed to be put in front of taking money from people. That's the most basic responsible function.
Greg, I'm sorry, but you just can't put that on someone else. It's like you took money together. It's your shared responsibility. You can't say, yeah, I objected it. No, it's your baby now. Your mom and dad, it's your baby, and you can't deny that baby, okay?
I agree with you. I agree with you, Yaniv. I sat on this for too long. I take that responsibility. I sat on this for too long, and now I am attempting to rectify the situation. It is a terrible situation.
Yeah, and I think
I find it even more irresponsible in the matter of, it's like, okay, so the CTO can work with the CEO can work with the CTO, and instead of working it out professionally in-house and explaining the community what's the next step, then all of a sudden, once you have money, you want to kick the CEO out. Doesn't make any sense.
No, I don't want to kick him out. That's a mistake. Again, I don't want to kick him out. I don't want him to leave the company. Door wants me to leave the company. What I want Door to do is to step down from CEO and become a managing partner. So Door can remain in many, many capacities, just not as CEO, because he doesn't have the chops to do this kind of management.
So we can.
With all due respect, it is my opinion that
Andy, wait a minute. So each partner can continue do whatever he feels like with his own budget without having to actually deliver anything as a partner rather than as an employee or whatever. Same point. It's like
no. That's why there's a board, and that's why there's a governance model and accountability to the community. This is exactly
I'm saying so much
over and over again.
No, so many words are spread here, and so little actual code is working. And I say we should have more working code and less spoken word and less written pages.
You know what? I am all for getting back to coding. I love coding. That's enjoyable and fun. It has not been fun working with Door. And what we're seeing is that Door doesn't have the ability to even put together the budget or look at the guidance from the budget that was put together by Ed and myself.
Has anyone externally reviewed this budget? Anyone with expertise, aside from Greg, who's got his life's work on the line, and aside from Door, who's been swamped as a CEO?
Here's the thing.
Which budget are you talking about, Joseph?
I'm saying like the one that's being proposed, or like, I mean, either of the two, because one proposes 330, I think, for the first 3 months, and then one needs almost $1 million. So is anybody externally who knows how to budget this stuff that is not either of you two reviewed this budget and said, yes, okay, this is how we do it. This is what I believe as a consult?
Well, certainly I was involved in some resource forecasting and some other models. I forget exactly what time that was, around the time of the crowd sale, perhaps early September. But Joseph, I think it comes down to at this point, today is what's the best allocation of Synereo's money in the bank. And you could start with a percentage, to say, roughly speaking, one category being G&A, marketing, legal, another one being the Synereo social platform, and the third one being RChain. What is a reasonable allocation of that? And I would say the majority should be on RChain based on the potential that investors invested in. But opinions may vary.
Well, then I don't understand that, because like I had a proposal, and it wasn't bulletproof. It was just off the top of my head because I wanted to try to, make a solution if nothing else. But propose that we just poll the development team, who is anonymously, if we must, who had who had worked closely with both Dor and Greg, who could attest to Greg's coding abilities, I guess, and to Dor's management style, what it was, see what they believe, see where they think funds could be allocated as a basis of it.
It's really a strategy question.
Hang on, we've already done this. Joseph, we've already done this. So in a meeting where Yaniv was present and Ed was present, what the development team said was, politics aside, all effort should go into RChain.
And so the development team, the core development team right now would attest to that.
That's exactly right.
What do you say, Yaniv? I mean, like, just what was said at the moment, I guess. Not your opinion now, but at the moment.
At the moment, everybody said that they believe that getting Special K working on the current platform and getting the social application on Special K working seems like waste of time. The Special K is so broken that it's just a waste of time to try to actually get it alive again. And it seems
that's not what they said. That's not what they said. And
that's what the developers said. And the developers are
actually that's not the case, and I will bring them on. But what they did say was all effort should go to RChain.
So you're just basically saying Yaniv lied to all of our faces just right here, right now.
That's correct.
That's a matter of how you put the question. When you put it, if you do you want to do some fun and do some RChain with me, then doing all the boring stuff you're doing, then obviously everybody wants to do some fun. But
that's not what was said. That's not what was said at all.
You're asking the wrong question, and it's just doesn't really make any difference at that point right now.
Actually, it does make a difference. It does make a difference.
Very simple. We have a technology we were trying to build up until now. It hasn't been working. And now when money is here, you want to jump over to the next project without having to deliver the current one.
That's not the case at all. And I have said this repeatedly. What I have said, and I am sorry that this is somewhat subtle for people to follow. What I have said is it is perfectly possible to take Special K and get it well past where it is today. However, it is...
You were not able to. You had 2 years and you failed to deliver.
No, Dor. What I have been doing over the last 2 years, as you know, is to work out what was necessary for the requirements and to develop to do the development team so that there isn't just one person who knows the code base.
Yes, but you also said that this was working.
It is working. You're being too black and white. It works if you are willing to stand up several different servers and get them talking to each other. Your claims about not working are false because I had teams of people who use the code in production. Now, the fact is that those people...
happening now. It's claims that you're making.
No, it is happening now because we are now wrapping all of that stuff up and automating that stuff in Docker, and that is taking a certain amount of time.
Greg, an honest question. Do you think that myself, Dor, and Yuval would have engaged in a founders agreement for Synereo, the company that you are part of now and the company who has now the funding that you are requesting, had we known the state of the stack and the requirements needed to get it to work at the time of the founders agreement?
I urged you and encouraged you to do due diligence. You didn't do that.
Oh, okay. So it's not my function.
Wait a second. I showed you how the code worked. I walked you through specific smart contract implementations. I showed you where it was deployed and who used it.
And you said
your claims that it doesn't work are false.
Does it work? Do we have a decentralized network running on a decentralized network?
What's the it? What I said was there is a content delivery network that works. And you can stand it up and do that yourself. I can show you the gets and the puts, and the content is being passed around the network.
Look, this is what you keep doing, and everyone should pay close attention. He's asked a very clear and simple question.
I never said we had a
decentralized answers, waving his hands around, gives you the impression that he wants, jumps into the technical details, and then spins the story to show you how you're actually wrong.
Greg, could you please mute so that we can actually hear Dor? Could you please mute?
It's entirely obvious to anyone who's been paying attention that we do not have working technology. We don't have an application. We don't have users, despite the promises that have been made from day one about having working technology. And when asked and when pressed about this, Greg just goes on defense and on offense. He attacks you for being incompetent, not being able to understand either what he's shown you or the developments that he speaks about, trying to convince you that it's actually working.
Joseph,
Joseph,
have I called you incompetent? Have I ever called you incompetent?
No.
Ed, have I ever called you incompetent?
No.
So I think if we bring on Henry and Gary, we'll find that I have never called them incompetent. I think this is all again politics and demagoguery that the Dor is attempting.
Actually.
Okay, great. So Henry, Dor made the claim that you would state in public that I don't know how to code and that I can't code.
No, I didn't say that. I said
what did you say?
I said that the team now has an impression that you are unable to deliver working code and that Special K does not work.
No, you said, no, that's not, we can go back
He did not say a name. He did not say so-and-so said Greg cannot do this. He did not. We are all here and we are hearing this conversation.
We have it on tape.
Anybody on the sofa.
He said they. He said they.
Exactly.
That Greg can't code. So who is they? Everyone? I mean,
Okay, so Henry, do you feel that I can't code? I mean, there's only 4 of them to ask. So we can just ask them one at a time.
It's not as important whether Greg knows how to code. Like seriously, we're seriously arguing whether Greg knows how to code.
If anybody has watched any videos where he's been coding,
Yeah, like there's another
everyone that he is.
It's not about writing code, it's about working technical products.
So what's important here is to establish the veracity of Dor's claims. Right? That's why we have to go over this, because Dor continues to make claims and they don't stand up.
But once again, the claim was that Special K is not working, and you're moving it, distracting to whether you can code or not. It doesn't
actually. No. And again, Special K works within certain parameters. We are pushing the envelope of those parameters as we move to deployment in the wild. That's not the kind of deployment considerations that we had before.
Okay, we're making it much more complicated than it really is. Okay.
No, that's the required level of complication if you want to deliver decentralized tech. Yes, absolutely. If you want to deliver decentralized, have you seen how hard?
Everybody, this is a very good level of details, but what the basics here are pretty simple. Really, it's really
I think the question.
No. If you have had to deal with the Bitcoin blockchain,
let's make it simple.
If you've had to deal with the Bitcoin blockchain, you would see that the Bitcoin blockchain is at least as fiddly as Special K.
Enough with all those words. Let's make it simple. And let's make it let's make it useful. Okay, let's make this discussion useful. We had a roadmap.
That is useful.
Okay.
That is useful. For now. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to accept simplifying things that are complicated.
Enough. We had a roadmap.
Again, enough.
Just as that, Greg. We had a roadmap. According to that roadmap, we were trying to use Special K to deliver the distributed web application on a very minimalistic feature list to get impressions from the community about how it's working. According to the current situation, it seems like getting it running on Special K is not as easy as we thought it would be, okay? And that's a very neutral way of putting it, okay? And now here's the decision. What's the next step? Taking more money, putting into more development and doers without being able to show the current, to prove our ability to deliver what we were trying to deliver up until now. taking another bet, or finishing what we started. And if Special K is so awesome, then in a matter of several weeks, we can get it over with. And if it's not that awesome, then why should we put some more money into your next project?
Why is the first, I don't understand. Okay, so it gives 300,000 for 6 months in this proposal, or 330. Sorry.
Wait, Joseph, can we just address that for a minute?
I'm about to. I'm wrapping around to it. I'm wrapping around to it. It says 330,000 for the first 6 months, rather than 330,000 before it meets some sort of milestone. Like what is the necessary milestone for Special K to reach to where we know that we can build a stack on it?
No. This is misframing the whole discussion. I'm not going to have that discussion. The reality is, we did an analysis looking at the side-by-side architecture at a much coarser level. This was done with the team, with Ed and Dora and myself, and many people thinking this through. We did a side-by-side analysis independent of whether or not Special K was working swimmingly or not. And what we said was the side-by-side architecture with the content delivery network and the blockchain is not secure. So even if Special K worked perfectly right now, turnkey, we would not deliver the Synereo application on that architecture.
Does Synereo have an alternative plan to implement the social application? Which, if that's what Synereo will focus on funding, does it have any sort of roadmap?
That's what we're going to do. We have spent some time now doing research into other existing technologies that would allow us to create an actual working product that's based on decentralized networks.
Okay, if in the future Synereo structure, will there be a more full officer? I don't want to say cabinet, but people to share the CEO load?
Yes, of course. I mean, the only reason why I've had to carry this load and burden, even I would say by myself, was just that we did not have the resources, and I preferred to allocate everything that was available into development. Now that we've raised the funds, we are able to engage a full team.
Right. So what we're seeing is that Dora builds a brand with my work, and then
what work? You have not created any work. No one on this call has experienced anything that you've created.
That's crap.
All we have are floating bits of useless code that does not connect or amount to anything.
That is absolutely crap.
So is the future of either entity more secure, focusing on a social app rather than spending resources on a platform? Like with the remaining resources that RChain will not get, is there enough to secure enough future funding to actually create a realistic decentralized application? Because by the time the technologies are developed around a decentralized application, there are going to be other leaders that have already occupied that niche, right? But I mean, like, I'm just kind of curious what the alternative is. If 330 grand for 6 months is what RChain gets, what's the other side look like?
The other side looks like a startup that's aiming to use the funds that it has over the course of between a year and a half to deliver a working application that people can use and that they care for. And based on that, they can either raise more funds or just rely on the existing product to continue the operation. We don't have the luxury to bank on empty promises made by someone who has not shown he's able to deliver. And I want to repeat this again. We're talking about a project that's an order of magnitude more complex than Special K. Greg has not been able to deliver a working Special K or a working decentralized network. There's no reason to assume that he's able to deliver something much more complex that he has not even started building, certainly not within the time frame of a year or a year and a half.
Again, this is false.
Even I have to make the responsible decision, which is to give Greg the chance to step out of the company as he wished himself and already carried out unilaterally to some degree. Let him focus on what he wants and let Synereo actually fulfill its promises to its investors and supporters and create working applications that are decentralized and use AMPs to produce an attention economy.
Okay, so for the last time, Special K has been used in production for 2 years.
But it has not been used for Synereo. There's no sign of working code. No one for the past 2 years that Synereo, no one has been able to see working Special K.
That's not true either. Your claim, there's a big difference between putting on a new front end on the back end code and having a new deployment mechanism and saying that Special K doesn't work. That's your statements are false. Special K has been. I need to complete this. So Special K has been working in production. So the statement that Special K doesn't work is false. Number two.
I think Special K is certainly broke. Okay, when we ran into performance problems for building the social app, we optimized the code and broke it.
That's correct. There were definitely situations where we broke it, but now those have been fixed.
And it's gotten to the point where the code is modified until no good.
Well, I don't know that.
Well, I shouldn't say no good. I'm saying it's to the point where you're the only one that can really utilize it effectively. But
no, that's also not.
Certainly, it plans to continue to use it, and it's a great toy, and it was part of an incremental development cycle of a mathematically formal machine.
That's correct. It is a part of an incremental cycle. But let me complete this statements here. So the claim is that nothing works, and Door wants to reduce this to black and white, and that's not acceptable. The reality is that what Synereo promised its investors and what the investors are interested in is RChain, and that's why there is the shift. It's not because I would love to be able to spend more time and resources on Special K because I hate leaving things incomplete. And there are definitely things I would like to improve about Special K.
Greg, how much time you would need right now to get Special K running?
I don't want to spend the money on that.
Okay, but theoretically, right?
No, but the point is that Special K.
The question,
okay, I am not going to accept the language that Special K doesn't work.
Greg, it's been working in industrial. It's been working in industrial application for you say 2 years now, and correct. I think it's important to remember that even at the beginning of Synereo's inception, it was believed that the social app could run on a standard blockchain solution, and that would work. And that belief was modified and modernized, and right. The resulting course of action was taken is very different than the one that was initially being taken.
No, Joseph, that's not what happened.
That is absolutely correct.
As soon as we engaged Greg, and that can be easily seen in the white paper, we understood that we're not going to rely on a blockchain for the purpose of creating the Synereo social network for anything other than value transfer using Bitcoin type currency.
That's what Joseph said.
Everything else was supposed to rely on Special K and on the smart contracting mechanism that again is referenced in the white paper and that Greg promised was already working. You have to understand, he came into the project saying, hey guys, this exists. All you have to do is modify the UI, bake in the attention economy, and utilize the decentralized network that I already have available. That's what he said. You can see this reflected in the early Hangouts. I'm going to post an interview in a second where you can see this very clearly being said as the main message that we put out there. And this is also what's been published here in this crowdsale funding-based milestones that we published around the first crowdsale that we had, where this would only require 115K it would produce an alpha release with distributed node software available as proof of concept, 6 months. We're not even at that stage with an order of magnitude more funds invested into Special K. We're not there. So you have Greg, who came into this project, made various promises, talked about technology that he had and that was existing, wasted 2 years of everyone's time without delivering any working product, nothing that you or anyone else on this call can use. And now wants to take the money that was raised and jump off to a new company that he solely controls and work on a project that's even more ambitious, even though no one on the team has any confidence in his ability to deliver anything.
Well, if milestones are an issue, then, okay.
So first of all, Joseph, let's go through this carefully. Henry, Ed, anyone here, do you have the confidence in my ability to deliver things? So George just made the claim that no one has the confidence that I can deliver anything. So let's just check and see.
I'll answer the question, but I also want to cover a few other points that were made over the last couple minutes. Dora, I think you are painting a too black and white picture of, does Special K work or not? Because clearly there's much of it that does work. But did it get over the finish line for what we had hoped for Alpha? No, it didn't. Not yet. Greg, I have tremendous faith in what you are developing for RChain, and the blueprint, the specification for what needs to be built. I think you need to be surrounded by other people that have a very focus on finishing, and together that combination can produce a very successful RChain. Does that answer your question, Greg?
Yes.
Let me add quickly that we have 2 Project 11 proposals in to use the Special K platform. Actually 3 projects that have begun, and we're awarding AMP bounties for 2 of them this month. We're, the blind leading the blind in terms of using the technology, and we don't have high expectations of what we can use it for, except that we can prototype contracts.
Right, and that's all.
That's why it can be primarily as a learning tool.
That's right. All that we wanted to do with this particular effort was to get to Alpha, to demonstrate that we're making progress. The only thing that's really necessary for the final demonstration is to make it easier to wire up nodes. Nodes can be wired up. Stuff does flow across the nodes. It's not easy to do that, and we're fixing that now.
Henry, I'm really sorry to put you on the spot, but your voice is really needed in this conversation. Do you think it's ever going to be possible to use Special K to wire up nodes and create a decentralized network?
It's a difficult question to answer in as straightforward and as a black and white manner as I've been hearing things been attempted to be talked about in this whole conversation. Hello, everybody. This is sort of like, this is my air and water every day. I mean, I've lived in this code base for the last, 4 or 5 months. I've seen all the horrors and the joys of it, but I understand, having worked with Greg, having talked with Greg, having seen evidence of this left behind in the code base, that there was a time in its history that Special K indeed worked as advertised. When I came onto the project, it was mostly used in what's called co-located mode, which is a non-distributed mode. So this was the mode that Greg established for testing, and this is what it sort of established. This was what allowed the Indian team working on the UI to continue to sort of forge ahead, was that they didn't need to be running a full decentralized network in order to sort of utilize the back end of the software. So as we worked on the server in the early stages of my involvement in the project, we were working in this co-located mode, essentially single node mode. And that's where we, did our first sort of round of overhauls related to some performance issues that Ed had noticed during the course of UI development. Now, at the time, Greg had talked about how it was going to be a reasonably straightforward process to then go and sort of turn on the distributed functionality. And, we had no reason at that point to sort of disbelieve him on that. So we sort of accepted that we would just be able to make these, simple set of changes, and the sort of decentralized or / distributed, I should say, really is probably a better, where the distributed mode would sort of work as advertised. It's been my experience since then, though, no, unfortunately, it has not been that simple. And part of it has come from the complexity of working in an old code base where even with Greg, it requires him to sort of refamiliarize himself with his surroundings when making changes. But another layer of complexity is added by the fact that, as Greg has mentioned, the sort of deployment strategy that we're using is significantly different than the way in which special K / agent services nodes were used in the past. So before, on a server that was running this software, you would have, it'd be like a normal sort of Amazon style, cloud instance VM type thing, and you would have a JVM running, the special K / agent service stack. You would have an instance of RabbitMQ running alongside of that, may or may not be on the same machine, and an instance of MongoDB running alongside, which may or may not be on the same machine. And these three components formed the sort of underlying stack. In those type of deployments, it would be common to sort of already have RabbitMQ and Mongo running before you brought up the sort of main part of the stack. And so the way that Special K is capable of connecting to other Special K nodes relied on that invariant, on that sort of guarantee that you would already have running this additional software on these nodes. Now, as part of our desire to deliver a sort of a single package that cut down on the amount of maintenance overhead and the amount of technical know-how required for a node operator, before I was even involved in the project, there was a decision to use Docker to sort of containerize the application. So in this context now, we have that situation that I've described essentially being put inside of a box. And that box has a different set of constraints and requirements. I could go into this in detail, but I think the important thing to understand in that is that you don't have the same guarantees of having a running instance of Rabbit and Mongo available to you on both your sort of local machine, where you would bring up your instance of Special K, or on a remote machine. Whereas in the deployments that Greg used Special K in the past, there was, in fact, a team of sort of developer ops people who had brought up all of the requisite nodes in concert with one another in a sort of orchestrated, process, so that they could all be connected very easily. It's our desire to have the network be something that can be brought up in a reasonably self-contained way, so that a node can come up and start making communication with other nodes without needing to have the same degree of sort of simultaneous orchestration. At this moment in time, if you want two nodes of the Synereo version of the stack to talk to each other, they need to be brought up at almost exactly the same time. And that's been we've recognized that this is a huge problem. It generally only tends to work with two nodes. And so part of the engineering effort that's been going on for the last month and a half has been re-architecting the startup process so that a node can bootstrap itself into existence with no knowledge of other nodes before it then goes and connects to the other nodes. But this has been slow and difficult work, and one of the things that makes it challenging is the fact that, is because of the sort of size and complexity of the special K agent service code base, it's not always immediately apparent where and how to make those changes. And that's not necessarily an indictment of Greg. Part of that is that anybody who's familiar with working in large legacy code bases knows that you sort of struggle with going back and finding the right places in an existing code base to sort of retrofit and modify. And I think that speaks to some of the reason why Greg no longer sees evolving that platform as a viable option, because essentially it would take so much energy to revamp that platform by having to go back. I mean, entire parts of it would have to be re-architected, and just modifying an older code base is much harder in some cases than starting fresh. So that is a sort of maybe a bit of a technical view. Does anybody have any questions about the sort of technical view that I've just sort of...
I want to ask something very, very simple. Is this or is this not a working decentralized network capable of distributed content delivery or smart contracting?
Yeah, so in the black and white, I mean, the pretty clear answer is no. Currently, it's not. We are not doing that. I mean, I would say, you have to examine the current state of the bits, and can the bits deliver on that promise right now? And no, they can't. You could sort of tune that question, are they capable of? Well, potentially, I don't know. It could take a lot more time and energy and effort to get us to that point. And then the other question is, once we're there, are we satisfied with the results? Are we satisfied with the performance? And that's another question too. And I can't answer those until I have the sort of hard data in front of me.
Sure, but now we've chosen a path where we're not going to utilize special K. And the point here that's important and that I'm glad your overview supported is that we do not have something that we can use. And we are a startup. We have limited resources, limited time, and the limited attention of our users. There's no half pregnancy here. We either deliver a working application or we die. There's no in between. There's black and white in this world. You either deliver or you drop off. No one cares if you did something interesting.
Well, I don't think it is that black and white. I think that one of the reasons we were able to secure almost $5 million in funding is because people believe in extra things. And think about it like this. I mean, so say we can't use anything else, any of the RChain, Rolang, RoVM stuff that's been advertised over the past year, right? So if Synereo moves on in the future and moves to a social platform, right? Can it do it and achieve a social platform that's still relevant in a year and a half with the money that it has left? And another question asked would be, is Special K the only way to create a distributed network? Are there easier ways? And do we want to separate from people who have vision and who have know-how? You know what I mean?
So I also need to clarify. So we have to make a distinction between decentralized in the sense that there is no node in charge versus decentralized, meaning that you have you grow the network one piece at a time. So if decentralized means the former, then Special K, under the description that Henry just gave, actually does work, and you can have a decentralized network. And I will defer to Henry. Do you believe that statement to be correct? If you bring up the nodes in a concerted fashion, do you believe that works?
Oh yeah, so I mean, obviously, if we didn't have the Docker constraint at this moment in time as part of the picture, it would have certainly opened up and allowed a sort of approach to testing to see if indeed some of those guarantees do work. And I mean, it's worth considering from a technical management standpoint if there wants to be effort put in that direction. Docker has been kind of invariant since I was involved in the project, and so there's that. But my experience, see, honestly, Greg, it's as long as we've been testing in distributed mode, there was only like maybe a week when I was running things outside of a Docker container.
Right.
So it's like I didn't see that much activity in that space before we went back into the container. So
Right.
So let's agree that this is in black and white. Okay, so for the sake of the discussion and moving forward, let's agree that based on the feedback we've received so far, even if it's not black or white, so there is no clear black and white saying if it's completely worthless or it's functioning. So let's move on to the issues that can actually sort of provide a solution and are the purpose, I presume, of this meeting, and that's a governance model that is acceptable for you as founders, for the community, investors, and developers. And currently, that the offer that we have on the table is that the separation of entities. You, Greg, have said that that offer is not to be accepted because Dor remains as CEO of Synereo. Is that a correct summary of things?
Yes, that's correct. So my argument is that what we've seen here is black and white thinking. What we've seen here is a lack of nuanced discussion. The discussion has been reduced down to a kind of demagoguery and it has been politicized rather than being opened up to actual real conversation where there is nuance and there are new possibilities. And that was largely spearheaded by Dor. Because what it shows is his intent, and that's so. Let me just complete the thought. So the reason it was important to expose the intent is because the Synereo has a mission statement, and that mission statement is a network owned by the people who use it. And what we're seeing is that the clear indication that Dor identifies himself as owning the network and controlling the network and not really accountable to the community.
No, let me please clarify. What I control is a very limited business entity. Once we create an actual decentralized network, I'm not going to have any say in it. That's exactly the point of creating such a network.
The reality is that you are controlling all the resources that go into creating the network, and once the network is in place, that will put you in the seat of ownership.
Okay, so I would like to step in for a second here and just say respectfully. I mean, I know that part of the question that was levied in my direction was Greg's ability to deliver, and I don't have the sort of evidence to sort of speak to that directly. I can say that I sort of definitely would sort of tend to agree with the thing that Ed said, where I feel like, if Greg's going to deliver on RChain, it's going to be with other people. It's not just going to be Greg delivering that. So you can't really ask that question in isolation, obviously. But the other part of it too is that I think it's important to understand that there's been a lot of sort of speaking on behalf of other people in this conversation. And at times it sounds as though, Greg perhaps has sort of said it's the position of the developers have said this, the developers have said that. And
with the exception of the one meeting, Dor was the one who said this mostly.
Okay, well, irregardless, I have heard it said at times where you have expressed my view, or you've tried to sort of proxy my view into the conversation. I think because perhaps you saw that I was unwilling to sort of come in and be part of these sort of more confrontational situations. And the truth be told is I'm not entirely comfortable to the extent that people are speaking on my behalf as a developer. I mean, to the extent that I was just able to provide some of an account there in terms of the bits, I'm happy to continue to do that in detail, but I'm really not comfortable being enlisted in the kinds of sort of campaigning that's going on in these circumstances. And I like people who at least here listening to this call to sort of consider that when they hear Greg talking on behalf of the developers, they should maybe, consider that there are actually developers out there who they can talk to themselves directly.
And I strongly encourage that. And I don't, with the exception of the one meeting where there was a clear statement and I had everyone repeat it, I have done my best to not put words in your mouth. However, Dor has repeatedly in this meeting stated position of the development team.
Okay, but I also like to say that, you know, fundamentally, I understand a lot of Dor's, you know, concerns and issues at this stage in the game. They make a lot of sense to me. I understand the way that he feels given what he's seen and how slow it's been. I think, you know, if we try to step back from the sort of conflict at the moment and we look at some of what's gone on, you know, there was in good faith, there was an attempt to bootstrap Synereo using pre-existing software that had ostensibly a good track record. But unfortunately, the constraints that have been placed on it in the current environment have meant that, unfortunately, that didn't work out. Or it hasn't worked out so far. And, you know, it's important to understand that at least we can maybe cop to that much, that at this point in time, you know, we're falling short of that mark, while recognizing that not only are we falling short of that mark, but that there's also some bigger questions about the scalability of the platform in general, which is part of what's led to the sort of notion that there needs to be a new runtime, a new language, a new blockchain, because Special K was never going to be able to scale to that level. And that the sort of hopes and dreams that Special K could fuel the sort of Synereo social product seem to be a bit of a, you know, foregone conclusion in this case. Well, of the bygone era.
So fair enough. So I take your point. I think the way I would phrase it is slightly differently. That you certainly could put the existing resources into Special K, and with not and certainly not eat up anything like the $4.7 million that was raised to get it to the next level where the social application can be deployed. I don't see any problems with that.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to take $4 million, but
yeah, I don't either. But the reality is,
but I also don't know what it's going to take, which is another. I mean, that's, you know, my experience of working on it has not been, you know, we've pulled out the can of starter, we've sprayed it into the engine, we pulled the cord a few times, and voila, the lawnmower works. My experience has been, oh man, we have to take apart the engine, tool around, oil this, oil that, put it back together, pull the cord, nothing happens, and, you know, do the next thing. And we've been doing that now for the last, you know, 5 months, in the sense of, if the lawnmower is a sort of distributed network version of Special.
Well, so. I guess I wouldn't characterize it like that, because definitely the SOC 91 work is complete.
Oh, but I mean, we have no way of testing the SOC 91. I mean, we've never tested the SOC 91 work under distributed mode. I mean, I can tell you that the importer, for example, doesn't work anywhere near as well as one would hope, given the work we've done on SOC 91. It doesn't even work in distributed mode at this point. So,
okay,
the jury's out on that still.
Okay, I haven't seen the recent bugs on the importer.
I mean, my opinion is, yeah, Special K has been a challenge. It hasn't met all the requirements, or even a simpler version of requirements that LivelyGig had. And I think the work on Special K should stop. In terms of the current architecture, there's a remake of Special K under RChain, but it's quite different technology.
Yeah, so it's more like the Special K concept reapplied, right?
Exactly. But I personally don't think it makes sense to, from a resource strategy perspective, company strategy perspective for Synereo or RChain, to continue investing in Special K.
I agreed with that point of view. That was my assessment. That was my assessment fairly, you know, as early as January, that the better thing to do was to go after RChain.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wanted a different outcome than this. Obviously, betting LivelyGig's business on having more from Special K earlier. But from where we are now, I think it makes sense to put the majority of R&D funds into RChain, and possibly a simple application on top of RChain.
Right, and
I want to ask you something very simple.
Yeah, one second. The big challenge really is there's two big promises made to the Synereo community investors, and I think it's going to be very difficult to deliver on both promises, and so one needs to be chosen, and I would recommend RChain being that primary one. Dory, you wanted the question?
So I wanted to ask you, I mean, I'm really, I don't have the word in English maybe. You've spent a year and a half of your life trying to set up Lively Gig on top of Special K based on the promises that Greg delivered to both you and I.
Right.
And it hasn't worked. You now don't believe that it can work, but somehow you still have faith in Greg's ability to deliver something even more grandiose, and you're willing to stake Lively Gig's future on it, even though only barely started.
I didn't say that it can't work. I'm saying that it's not working. Well, I don't know what context that was taken, but it's not working today in all the ways that we had hoped it would.
A year and a half ago, did you believe that you would be here? More than a year and a half later, still not having.
I'm sorely disappointed in a lot of things. I'm overall. Let me just say I'm grateful to Synereo for the opportunity and for revenue to Lively Gig, but from a technology perspective and a business, I thought we'd be farther along, of course. Some of that I think.
And we're grateful for your participation. I mean, we loved having you around despite not being able to actually use all of the work you've done to create a working application. But I'm asking again, if Greg was your employee, if he were your CTO in your company or just a tech lead, and he made those promises, spent a year and a half of your time and much of your resources, would you allow him to just scrap it all and sell you on a completely new tech stack that's even more extravagant than the one before, and just fund him and give him the leeway to take it on? Would you be comfortable making such a decision?
In this case, yes. No, is it comfortable? Not exactly. No. This is far from ideal, the situation and so forth. Greg's made missteps, yes. I don't agree with everything he's done. I don't agree with everything you've done. I'm not proud of everything, all the decisions I've made. But I think RChain has a tremendous potential. I think the foundation, the blueprint of a scalable public compute utility and blockchain is enormous. And I think do I understand the math in all of its depths that I would like to? No, I don't. But I believe it is a strong foundation that deserves to be built, and it's the right thing to do for society and for decentralization movements.
But we don't have
like to make a comment similar to what you've been just discussing as to whether we felt, let's add, whether we felt that we'll be here, whether we felt that a year and a half ago. I certainly didn't feel or think or hope that I will be here in this forum a year and a half ago, but for a very different reason. Because a year and a half ago, I was fairly certain that Dor is going to fail miserably because I didn't think that he will be able to keep Synereo on float. Because again, I thought that he will not be capable of delivering. And CEO has certain deliverables. CEO is not merely a leadership position. It's not a person who merely communicates culture or behave himself as a CEO. He has very concrete deliverables, and I did not believe that he will be able to keep Synereo afloat. And again, this is one of the reasons why I felt comfortable with relinquishing my equity in stake. However, over the course of the year and a half, I had full visibility, almost full visibility, I believe, into how Dor managed Synereo, maybe sometimes behind the scenes, how he basically through grit and persistence and very hard negotiations, even unkind negotiations with various companies and projects, has managed to secure investment after investment deal after deal to keep the project afloat. Keep in mind that the project does not have users, does not have traction, does not have clients, and he has delivered. So if we're talking about like actual belief in terms of delivery and grit and financial responsibility, I currently I am capable of thinking of Dor in terms of black and white and trusting his ability as CEO, despite his, Dor being Dor.
Okay, so Andy, can I ask you one question? Just one question. Do you think that Dor would have done that if I had left him? If I had distanced myself from the project?
Yes.
I want to hear.
It would have been easier. We would have an actual problem.
I want to hear Andy's.
I'm being asked for my opinion there.
So if I had stepped away from this project and I hadn't lent my name and delivered all of the things that I've delivered in terms of Casper, the Synereo architecture, the existing architecture, the white paper, if all of those things simply hadn't existed, if Synereo's relationship with Ethereum hadn't existed, do you think Dor would have been able to do that?
I believe that many people, including yourself, were instrumental and necessary for the success of Synereo. So, and that includes many people on the team.
Yeah, but that's not my question. That's not my question. My only question was, if I had walked away from this project, would Dor have been able to make that raise?
I don't believe you would. I think you were necessary.
Thank you.
That does not, however, pretty much mean anything else. I want to make that clear.
So okay, Greg, I'm just kind of curious because we've had conversations publicly where you've mentioned, as I'm sure and you and Dor both, I'll say, are absolutely stretched, underwater, right? I mean, most of the time in your week is taken up. I'm curious how much time you personally spent on modernizing Special K, because you also do research, the behavioral type stuff. I mean, you're working on Rolang, RoVM, blockchain, Casper, everything, right? I mean, that's breadth, right? Not depth. So I guess I'm curious what it would look like if Synereo could produce a social app and Rolang, which is a language, and RoVM, which is a language to traverse a blockchain. Are like more bite-sized, I mean, is that more reasonable, like more bite-sized products, deliverables, instead of the entire RChain as a deliverable?
Well, it seems like there's multiple questions in your question.
Okay, well then first, I guess, how much time would you estimate you spent looking at Special K per week?
It depends on the week. In the summertime, I was spending lots and lots of time on getting SOC 91 delivered. Other times, I spend much less time. So in the last year, what was more important to me was to make sure that we had our requirements ducks in a row, and number two, to make sure that we had a development team that could be put in place around the code base.
Sure.
So I spent a lot more time interviewing people, finding people, talking to people to make sure that because if it was just going to be one person working on the code, the project was dead. So
yeah.
There needed to be multiple people. So I spent most of my time working on getting people into the code and making sure that we had a team around the code, and that's what we had until the development team has basically been dismantled. So we had not just a team, but we had a really good team, and people were having fun. So that's that was one of the things that I spent my time. So you could say that I was spending my time modernizing Special K by getting other people into the mix.
Gotcha.
Just out of curiosity, when you say development team has been dismantled, what are you referring to?
So right now the development team is just you and Gary and Julia, and that's it. There's nobody left.
But I mean, when you say, the only other people who were involved were Jack and Matt, and Matt was on a short-term contract, and so.
And Nirvanic. and Ed.
Oh, well, I mean, aren't Nirvonic still somewhat involved in the same capacity that they were?
That is currently being spun down.
Oh, okay. I was unaware of that, but I assume we probably covered that in the stand-up today.
So the whole thing is so again, but it's also not just the dismantling from the point of view of losing people. It's also dismantling from the point of view of the environment has just become just horrific. It's not good, and I need to be able to work with a team where we're able to be productive because it's a good solid team. And people have fun doing it.
Well, I mean, personally, I've never felt like we're being, hindered by week in, week out by the things that have been going on in the sort of upper levels. Like, it's not as though that's become an impediment to actually getting the work done.
For me, it has been a huge distraction. So just to clarify some of Greg's comments, I forget when, a week or so ago, I decided for LivelyGig to end our verbal agreement with Door to work on the alpha through the end of December, which was the verbal agreement, and the reasons are multiple. All of them have been talked about during here, but in addition, largely it's a matter of patience, right? Where I ran out of patience with the types of things talked about here. So that includes, myself, Navneet, and 1.5 of the developers at Nirvonic are shifting to focus on LivelyGig things exclusively for a while. But yeah, Henry, to your point is this partially because I was privy to some of the negotiations with Greg and Door and big stakeholder in the future of the company, LivelyGig. I was extremely distracted for the last.
No, I mean, well, Gary and I were a party to some of the earliest sort of conflicts over the past 4 months, and yet they haven't really affected the sort of day-to-day goings-on.
Yeah, good for you. I admire that in both Greg and Gary and you.
I mean, I can say the same about myself. Obviously, it's been a distraction. It's been very disappointing having to conduct our business like this. But for the most part, I can attest, at least about myself and the team that I've been in contact with, it has not severely affected our performance.
Well, fear not, investors. The Chinese wall is in effect. Yeah.
Well, I don't know that there is a Chinese wall.
I was being somewhat facetious, but
yeah. No, fair enough. But anyway, so I believe that what we've heard from most of the parties here is that Door would not have been able to make it to where he is without my involvement.
We've also heard that Special K didn't perform how it would have.
Well, I agree, and I'm more.
Just so we can balance the situation.
No, that's a.
I mean, if we really want to balance the situation, I would say that if Greg was spending all of his time, for Synereo working on the existing code base, we might be at a very different point today. But but part of that is that there was never going to happen because there was always this split of concerns. I mean, when I came onto the project, there was already motion in the sort of RChain, Rolang direction, despite it not having the name at the time. But
that's exactly right, and I think, and this is
to add to that, Greg, simply because you are very factual. I actually want to point out that what you said is actually not factual. Right now, you said that everybody heard that we believe if it wasn't for you, this project wouldn't have been successful, and Door couldn't have done it without you. Like, I think that's actually not, at least what I heard from Andy.
I think what I heard Andy say was point blank, if I had walked away, the Door wouldn't have raised the money.
Andy said that.
So again, that's.
What is that supposed to prove?
Well, because what it measures is Door's performance, right? If Andy is measuring,
that is incorrect. My statement does not project anything on Door's performance.
I think it does, and here's how. Right. So if you're going to measure the performance of the CEO in terms of his delivery, and then you say that if you take away the guy who's doing the tech and he won't be able to deliver, then you have to apportion that his ability to do that in terms of the guy who's doing the tech. I think that's a really simple math. That's very simple math that other people can follow. Now,
I gotta say something, guys, for a second. Also, too, don't underestimate the actual work that the individual community members put in regards to the success of the fundraiser. Like, really don't underestimate that.
No, I tend to I very much agree with that. I think that's a good thing, and that's what why.
Because one second, because if you don't think these people were aware, even if this is now the first time that it's public, if you don't think these people were aware from the jump and understood and still decided to move forward, then it's just pure arrogance. Like,
understood what?
No, I absolutely agree. I think that
understood what, Patrick?
Understood that there's a divide. There was obviously a divide from the jump, but these people like Jim, perfect example, persevered through because they wanted a solution. Like that energy caused the success of the fundraiser. That was what caused it. If you want to,
I hear you. I think that's absolutely clear. So I think what we've also heard is that the Ed and many others believe in RChain and believe that that's the direction going forward. But most importantly, Synereo published the architecture document, and that was what informed our promises to our investors. So I took a big risk. I took a big personal risk in putting all of my wood behind the RChain architecture rather than shoring up Special K. And I did that because I knew it might come to this. I knew that there might be an issue where someone would attack my credibility based upon my decision to shift to RChain. That was a personal risk, but it's a risk that I've been willing to take because I have done the analysis of the market, and the market requires a scalable blockchain that's scalable enough that you can host the content delivery network on the blockchain, and there are specific requirements that go into that. So from my point of view, this is where the company needs to go, and this is what the company has promised its investors. And if we look carefully at the data that's come out in this call, what we're seeing is that we get a reduction to black and white thinking under the current management that's not going to be able to deliver, and the shift is directly away from what we've promised investors and into something that is less interesting to most investors.
So the proposal that we have.
Let me say something to that.
In addition, promised also includes a social network, and I think Synereo as a whole has overpromised and needs to reset expectations now. That is very difficult to do both in a timely fashion, and the roadmap is too aggressive right now.
So I tend to.
I want to say something as well, Greg. Please, you think, love. We promised a lot. And we were selling a lot, and people came here for Dor and for Greg and for the hope and for the vision we have. Now, we promised to deliver both bicycles and the spaceship, okay? And now we got the money, and the CEO goes to the CTO to say, okay, so where's the bicycles we promised? And the CTO say, no, the bicycles are not interesting. We should be delivering.
It's a little bit more like the DeLorean in the Back to the Future than a bicycle. But yeah, I get where your gist. Yeah.
Okay, and here's the thing. We want to jump into the next big thing without actually showing any kind of capability. And what I'm saying is, okay, so there's a big risk, and I understand risk in both ends. On the one hand, Greg is saying, no, that bicycle thing, that social app thing is not very interesting. It's not the vision. Real vision is RChain. We could do
Investors are saying that too.
Good.
Yaniv, I'm not saying that. I need you to be clear. I 100% support developing the Synereo social application. We are only talking about sequencing and priorities. That's all.
Okay, so let me
finish my point. Just let me finish my point. So here's the thing. I'm not sure how far we are from finishing that bicycles, okay, that we were promising. Maybe we decide it's no longer interesting, but I can totally understand the risk of how can we deliver or how can we promise the next big thing when we are not able to actually do the little thing.
So Yaniv, again, this I've tried to be super clear about this. If we reduce this all to black and white thinking and let's make this simple, we're not going to be able to come up with the kind of nuanced solutions that are demanded by the market. Here are the requirements as I understand them that will enable us, and a strategy for addressing them that will enable us to go forward. We have to show progress to the market. We can show progress to the market by continuing to have a development on the existing special case stack that enables us to develop out the user experience. And the reason that's important is because there's tons and tons of work that goes into user experience that just doesn't have anything to do with the backend. But if you do have a backend functioning well enough that you can test out things and it actually is delivering content, then that's good enough. And that's all that's required to move forward. So and be aware, we have nothing in the way of any sort of design for the user experience around the attention economy. So there's lots and lots and lots of work that can fruitfully be done on both with the community and on behalf of the community to develop out that user experience using the existing backend.
But I'm interrupting for a minute to make it efficient, because that is, I happen to to be there in the daily meetings with the UI developers, and what I can tell you for sure is that the main issues that were blocking us over there is Special K. We're kind of running on UI stuff until Special K will be working and we can get it done. Now, here's the thing.
I don't agree. The only thing that's blocking, the only thing that we're working on in Special K is just the node-to-node feature. There's nothing else blocking UI.
Which is pretty much.
I mean, there are a host of SOCs that have gone ignored and sort of unaddressed as a result of putting most of our efforts towards distributed at this point. I mean, there are lots of other little issues that we can't be solving because the sort of elephant is not getting addressed at this point.
Okay, so that's not blocking UI development.
Well, it's certainly complicating things. Hey, is that Gary? Gary, hello.
I mean, to the best of our knowledge, those issues aren't actually to do with Special K at this point, though. I mean, it may arise that we find some issues with Special K, and there are some issues remaining with SOC 92 still that, to do with cleanup and things. And to my eye, those issues are actually a lot bigger than what we currently give them credence for. But notwithstanding that, I mean, the issues that I know of are actually most likely to be in the glossy val layer rather than Special K.
Yeah, no one's made the distinction between glossy val and Special K.
Well, I think we should.
Heretofore, and I think you're absolutely right. It's just we've been generally treating Special K as a monolithic identifier for the back-end stack, and it's one of the distinctions that's, I think, important in understanding Greg's position is that he tends to talk about Special K as the part that consists of two of the components which form the sort of distributed database / content delivery network / user model, which is the agent service and Special K packages, but that the actual part that interacts directly with the front end is what's known as glossy val. And generally that has been the nexus of a lot of friction between the UI development and the back end.
Yeah, you're right, Henry. I, for example, call the whole stack Special K when I'm simplifying.
Yeah, and I mean, it's generally been part of the kind of way that it's been talked about with the community and PR, so that it's hard to sort of keep all the different bits, separated as they should be. But it's certainly true that many of the thorny issues that have arisen between the two teams stem more from the glossy val layer. Although I do think that there are underlying sort of performance concerns that may go all the way down the stack. So
I think that's fair. But I think, again, this is the kind of discussion that I relish and cherish. It's nuanced and it's practical. And it's the kind of thing that we need to be able to do if we're actually going to deliver. We actually have to get our hands dirty and get the stuff done. If people want less gab and more stuff, this is the kind of discussion we have to have.
Well, these are technical discussions which are great, but we couldn't get alpha across the finish line yet because of the server tech stack, and the question I think in front of us now is: does it make sense to continue to invest in that so that we get great user feedback around the social layer and so forth? I think not, personally, but that's a really important decision to talk about.
Right. So, but Ed,
RChain exist without special K?
So again, I think it's really, really important if you elide the distinction between gloss val and special K, then let's say we just, we did that for a moment. Then what you'd be having to do is to go redo an entire HTTP to server API, right? And that work doesn't have to be lost, right? That would be resetting the UI team considerably. So yes, Henry, I would much rather be coding as well. So this kind of discussion is actually substantive and important. I believe that we don't need to be putting much more into the server apart from basic node to node, and just put enough into glossaval to allow for the UI to go forward, the user experience to go forward, and that most of the server resources shift over to the development of RChain. And in point of fact, even with impoverished resources, we're making some pretty good progress there. So I really, really think that that would be a cost-effective way to go forward. So
assuming that proposal in its core is acceptable, you being the CTO and the technical leader, and now we're negotiating governance, which is sort of the next actionable item, like the thing that should probably come out of this meeting, related to governance and budgeting and how we make the development process as efficient as possible with minimal friction between yourself, the development team, and pretty much anyone else that can hinder your progress.
But that's a big shift, Andy, right? Because what I'm hearing from Dor is he wants me out, right?
I'm sorry. You're the one who said.
You opened the new Slack channel. You opened the new meeting in parallel to the Synereo's meeting.
I don't think that.
Who wants out, Greg? Who is out? Who wants out?
Stop this. Seriously, let's
focus.
There's 100 things that can be contested and argued about. Let's not do that. Let's focus as to what would be the simple, best way of moving forward, which is acceptable given the feedback that everyone has given and received during this meeting.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Andy. I think that's absolutely. And what I'm hearing from you, though, and all I'm trying to do is to clarify your position. Your position, as I understand it, is not the same as Dor's position. Because your position is that I remain a CTO and execute according to the technical plan that I have laid out for the last 8 months.
So I have, in my mind, there are two sort of acceptable positions, and you're welcome to basically interject when it doesn't seem logical to you. So one setup is where you proceed to form a new legal entity for the RChain, which you will be setting up in whichever corporate government model and jurisdiction you see fit. And if you don't like the word manage, you will be basically accountable for whatever that entity does. That entity will receive not insignificant funding from Synereo, bootstrapping, and will be open to whoever else wants to fund it. Synereo will basically transfer the bootstrapping money, and there will be a certain roadmap against which the entity has to deliver, and Synereo must continue funding it as long as it continues to deliver against that roadmap. Now, that's one of the proposals. The second one is where you remain within Synereo as CTO, and based on what I'm hearing and saying and seeing, this will simply introduce more friction, right? So you will have more interface with Door, and which is probably not optimal and not really beneficial for neither Synereo nor RChain.
So I hear what you're saying. Under the current trust framework, or the context of trust, what I heard Door do in this meeting and over the last several months means that I can't trust Door. And I've heard him state point blank falsehoods that were proved false in this discussion, and anyone viewing the video can see the refutations of the claims. And what it exposes to me is ill intent, ill will. And because it doesn't do what is required of a CEO, which is to dig into the details and understand the real details of the situation.
Does anyone on the call besides think I've made false claims about the technology, about Greg, about where we are, about the available product, about anything?
With all due respect, yes.
I think that all this judgment of each other is not helpful to the conversation.
I'm not asking about judgment.
And it seems to me that
false claims.
That we invested in a system in amps that was going to build one system, and what they're saying today is that it's going to build RChain on the side and it's going to build some other system on the other side, which it would not be what we bought into.
What I just heard Joseph say is that he heard that. I know that Ed has...
With all due respect, and a lot of the, Brent said it best, but claims have been over the top and on pretty much all fronts. Just to clarify, my position is that I don't think it seems fair, and I know that there's a lot of history that none of us have seen between you two. That, you know, a lot of people would say, like, there's some work to be done, right? And even if it can't be, I don't think that it's fair to get rid of a CEO or call for a CEO to step down who didn't have a cabinet to disperse the workload, right? And I also don't think that it's fair for the CSO's project and vision to be killed because he wasn't able to solely focus on the project. I think that only having 126 grand in investment in funding the first year can drive people to make claims and to take on loads that are reaching. I don't think that that's uncommon at all. I also don't believe that either of you, either Greg or Door, are incompetent of doing the things you say you do. But you know, like that's just my opinion. Like, is there any reason for us to think that Door can't grow as a CEO and foster whatever culture and nuance with an experienced cabinet surrounding him? And is there any reason to really believe that Greg, focusing entirely on Rolang or RChain and given the appropriate funding, can't deliver a blockchain solution? Because I've seen a lot of people, or I've seen both of you going in about a million different directions. So basing criticisms off of performance this year and holding on to those seems to be like kind of a counterintuitive way to reason about your qualifications for your positions.
I mean, I tend to agree that if it were all possible for Door and Greg to sort of put down the hatchets and begin to try a process of reconciliation here, that, you know, there's really no need at this point for the kind of finger pointing that's gone on, and to the extent that it has. It is really, I mean, in this context, it's certainly counterproductive because we're actually trying to discuss the future. But I mean, you know, it's at this point, I think we've heard all of the things, we've heard all of the sort of claims that have been made against one another in that regard. And it's sort of like, I would hope that we could sort of begin to move beyond that stage of the discussion and not use the other one, you know, speak more in terms of I statements as, you know, shrinks do or whatever.
Yeah. And everyone has something huge on the line here. Like, I mean, everyone, even in the community, like deeply obviously believes in the unified Synereo vision. That's not in question at all. And I mean, everybody admires, you know, the qualities in in you guys. And everybody has something on the line here. Like Dora, your future as a CEO and company in a decentralized economy, and Greg's reputation and life's vision. I mean, everyone has something large on the line. So I understand why ill will is perceived from both sides. Yeah, sorry, I had to get that out.
No, that's excellent. This is why, like, this is deep and this is long and ongoing, and they're both adults and they're reasonably capable both in their own domains. And I feel like the new model should simply reduce the friction between the two and allow each to focus on their own function. Now, Greg, you've mentioned that you have a trust issue with DOR. So we need to take that seriously. And obviously the interface, whatever it's going to be, will basically have to make sure that you don't have to trust DOR in order to receive the funding. Basically, as long as there is a legal agreement and there could be a person who sort of performs an escrow kind of function that delivers and continues delivering the funding against the roadmap, something that will not require DOR's approval, something that will not, make you go every 3 months or half a year to DOR and ask for money, because this is something that I assume you want to avoid. So does that make sense to you?
That would be fine. I put a workable model on the line with the budgeting that gives Synereo, whatever it is, let's say $1 million to work on the feature sets, and RChain roughly $2 million to go forward. I can go to investors and get the remaining funding in order to get this to market. And all that's required is that there's 100% wood behind that budgeting allocation and an organizational structure, and then we can get the rest of the funding.
So yeah, this comes down to how financially responsible, for lack of better description, DOR has to be with this new arrangement. So basically, RChain becomes a separate entity funded by Synereo. And the discussion here now is whether that staggered funding would be enough for you to go to someone else to receive the funding needed to complete RChain's mission, right? Again, without a governance model, having the Synereo fund RChain becomes quite challenging. RChain can have any kind of governance model that you want.
No, I'm not talking about RChain. I'm talking about Synereo. If Synereo is essentially the source of resources until RChain has other resources, and there's no governance model within Synereo, then that's way too much risk. I mean, just ask yourself: would you step into that role?
So you do not. RChain no longer depends. RChain will no longer depend on Synereo's governance model once the commitments are made. Like in a perfect world, once the commitments are made, you are welcome to operate autonomously within RChain, and Synereo has already made the commitment to fund it. So even so what happens internally in Synereo does not affect your work in RChain.
Again, if there is if there are milestones and evaluation coming from Synereo and there's no trust.
Not from Synereo. This is why it's important. So this is, sorry for not being clear enough. The evaluation has to come from a third party agreed upon by both Synereo and RChain at the time of the signing of an agreement. This is exactly what I want to prevent, that your dependence on DOR's approval of the deliverables.
That's a perfectly acceptable solution, as long as the funding matches the what I want is there to be a reasonable accountability structure for the funding that goes to RChain, and I want RChain to have the right funding up front, so it can be an escrow held according to milestones, but the funding needs to be allocated up front, and with that structure, the remainder of the investment can be gotten. Because this is almost exactly the structure that was laid out in the summer when we were talking with the investors. And by the way, the importance of the independence of the RChain nonprofit or the RChain co-op was agreed by the investor as the right marketing move, independent of the actual aims and goals of the people, to make sure that RChain is the insurance for making to ensure that Synereo meets its goals of having the network owned by the people who use it.
Excellent. So we currently have agreement in principle for the new setup for where you proceed to set up a separate legal entity for the RChain, where you will be able to, basically you will be managing it autonomously in any kind of model that you see fit. Synereo is committing to funding that entity with a pre-committed through escrow amount, and RChain is to provide a roadmap against which staggered funding will be released from that account. This is currently what's been agreed upon. Is that correct?
I'm in agreement with that.
Okay, then. So now I presume we have to basically agree to the funding that is acceptable as an initial prepayment into escrow. And I assume one of the things that are going to be in contention as to whether it's the initial milestone or, let's say, 2 or 3 staggered payments ahead, and what that amount is going to be. So do you have a figure in mind which you think would be enough for RChain to secure the additional funding required?
Oh, this has to be codified.
Okay, then. So given that we have agreement in principle, I think it's a good time to basically for everyone to start working on an acceptable proposal around that agreement in principle.
Yeah. So the rule of thumb that I use for the staging is and milestones is 40% upfront. That keeps everyone with their the skin in the game, attention focused on the project. So it's a mechanism by which people remain focused, and then the 60% is divided over 3 tranches, and that will be the model that I propose for the milestone markers, so that everyone understands how I will be going forward. I've seen this work repeatedly over the last 10 years as a mechanism for the timed release of funds.
How far off is the $350,000 figure or so that was communicated to you in the proposal that you have received? So it should be not 350. So what should it be? The initial milestone funding?
Hang on, I'm just pulling up a calculator.
Okay.
Wasn't it the 330,000 plus 500,000? Wasn't there some kind of an initials?
So 500,000, if I remember correctly, is against the delivery of the initial milestone. What Greg is proposing is that the initial payment would be larger and the following payments would be basically different. So
when I multiply 2.1 times 0.4, what I get is 0.84. So we're looking at is $840,000. So that's how far off we are.
So
guys, what I see here, if I may, just one little point, Andy, what I see here is some sort of a progress from starting the discussion with throwing mud at each other. We eventually sitting back down to the table and talking numbers. And that's a good place to be in. And I really want to move forward from this discussion in which we go back to the negotiations and Greg and Dor talk to each other on a daily basis and move forward with them. Like,
we're currently making very concrete, specific progress in so let's just keep going until we hit a wall where we have to iterate more tactically. Okay. So the figure that was quoted was roughly 800 and something thousand. The figure that was proposed was roughly 350. So that figure is against points on the roadmap.
That's correct. I'll have to sit down and look at what is a reasonable demarcation for that, basically in terms of resourcing. But again, you can get a sense of that by going back to the spreadsheet that I provided at the top of the meeting.
It seems like the roadmap in this context ought to be milestones delivered as opposed to features working as opposed to dates. And maybe there's some date constraint at the end. If it exceeds 2.5 years, then something else happens. But otherwise, it should be features being delivered.
Well, I think it's a little bit more complex, right? Because people have to eat. Wall clock time still marches on, and people still have to eat. So that's where time gets factored back in.
At least that needs to be clarified.
Right. No, I agree with you. It's a good point.
So here is my proposal. So on one end, let's ensure that the roadmap commitments for the initial release are technically responsible, meaning things that you can deliver with a very high level of certainty. So there is no arguments and discussions and toxicity and all that stuff. So things that you know for a fact that you will be capable of delivering. By me, you obviously, I mean RChain and the developers. And Synereo, on the other hand, will commit, I'm throwing a figure, 600,000 prior to the delivery of those. So we expect a roadmap with items that there will be less items than there are now. And Synereo will be providing $600,000 prior to the delivery of those items.
Can I ask something to be included there? I believe it's been Greg putting estimates and making undertakings. Can I ask that the development team be specifically included in agreeing to those timelines and milestones as being realistic?
Of course, but I think getting and pinning down dates is very hard, especially for something as ambitious as that.
But it's absolutely unacceptable to me to have to be subject to milestones being pulled out of the air by other people when I have no.
Well, I understand, but it also has to be done to give a shape to the vision occasionally, and that was done by me and Dor, and Greg had an opportunity to review those before they were shared. But so
here we are, Ed.
I absolutely agree with your point. But going back to the tranches of delivery, I think, ought to be arranged around deliverables more so, or heavily weighted around deliverables as opposed to dates.
So I tend to agree with that. So, but Andy, I'm looking at what it's going to require to set up the corporate stuff as well as have a dev team, and I don't think I can back down from the 0.84. So 0.84 up front so that the whole thing can get started, and the remainder of the 2 million over a period of time in roughly 20% tranches. 600 is not acceptable because there are going to be all kinds of expenses that have to do with business development and other things, and that's going to eat into the dev budget.
Business. So just to make it clear, the setup of the entity, the legal stuff, and so on and so forth, especially at this stage with no existing product or something that you're expected to sell, should be minimal. Moreover, we can definitely reach an agreement where you can use Synereo's resources. Like RChain can maintain, basically become a client, a separate client of the same entities that provide Synereo with accounting and legal guidance. And this should not be that expensive.
So this has been a part of my problem with Synereo, the Synereo management and leadership. The legal guidance has been has been far short of the mark, and there are lots of specific communications that I can point to where this was a significant business issue. So I have no interest in using Synereo's legal resources. With respect to the accounting resources, again, I would prefer to use other resources, and this has to do with trying to be more efficient with the capital and getting more bang for the buck. So that's not acceptable from my point of view, and that's part of, again, it's part of why I have wanted to have Door step down from a management position, because the resourcing there has been particularly bad. But moving on, I don't need those resources. I will have to pay for additional resources, and as we all know, there are other kinds of things that go into business development. It ends up being from my point of view, I'm always shocked and surprised by the spend. I think if we go look at the Synereo business development spend, people might be shocked and surprised. So again, I'm going to stand by these numbers. I don't think I need to do a lot more justification. If I simply have 4 developers on the staff, I'm going to have as you understand, with the right kind of, that's $600,000 there, and there's no business development costs in there.
So with 600,000, you believe that you will not be able to deliver the minimal initial milestones that would be required to release the second payment.
What I'm saying is that 4 developers is a minimum. 4 developers for this is for the initial milestones is a minimum, and I think anyone who's looked at the RChain roadmap would shake their head in vigorous agreement. So 4 developers is a minimum. Let's just multiply the numbers out. We're going to take them below market rate. We'll run them at about $150K per year. That's $600,000, right? So now, in order to attract those developers, they have to see that the money is in the bank. So that eats up all the $600,000, and there is no money left over for business development. There's no money left over to set up the corporation. There's no money left over to do basic things like have a website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So no, the 600,000 is not acceptable.
Okay, so I'll just like to point out, so I cannot obviously speak or make financial commitments on behalf of Synereo, but it is my opinion that delivering conservative roadmap against which Synereo puts a 600,000 prepayment is what I consider to be a responsible, both technologically and financially a financial way of kicking off the relationship. So it's my opinion, and
Okay.
Okay, and I have a suggestion at that point of the discussion. It seems like I'm really happy with seeing the discussion moving forward. And what I would really appreciate if we could try to achieve from this conversation is to try to commit to, let's say, a 1-week negotiation where Dor and Greg meet on a daily basis and try to push those things forward. And I know that for me, as a part of that community, that's something that makes me a bit more calm and a bit more confident. And I know that everybody else here would wish to see that conflict get resolved in a reasonable way and not like that. So
you need to add to that. I think it would be really great to actually have Andy part of those negotiations. Sorry for volunteering you, Andy. But I really enjoy always just listening to how logical you are and how focused you are on moving the project forward. So I think I do agree with setting a timeline in order to reach agreements, and hopefully a short timeline. But I think we would need somebody else in the room with Dor and Greg.
So Yaniv, unfortunately, I don't feel comfortable with that. And the reason is because we tried a smaller group of people to get to agreements on things, and that has always led down to a breakdown in discussion. It's only after bringing this to the community and forcing the issue that we've started to make progress. So I'm much more interested in having multiple eyes, and also from the point of view of transparency. The transparency here is really, really important to me. I need people to see the different perspectives and the different viewpoints. And I feel that being able to have the kind of nuanced statements and access to a richer supply of information is super important.
Look, so you can take those meetings and record those and share those with the community for the transparency.
It's not the same, though.
Wait a minute.
Let's not force them to work in a way that they don't want to. Guys, let's not do this. So I feel like part of why we're here is because we were trying to force both of them to interface in a way that they don't like to interface. So, whatever's working at the moment, let's try to make it work for them. So we currently have this disagreement regarding figures, but we also have, I feel, additional homework to do as to what the roadmap is going to look like and what will be the initial deliverables against the second milestone. I feel like it's a good sort of finishing sort of point for this discussion, because there has to be homework made on that front and discussion with developers. And perhaps the next iteration would be discussing the real roadmap and possibly discussing the real third party that is capable of reviewing progress. Does that make sense?
I've done the homework. I've provided for you the spreadsheet from that we did back in the summer, going into discussions in September with the potential investors. I don't think anyone here is going to be super surprised at the numbers that I'm proposing. For developers is a bare minimum for the kind of basically 4 developers is necessary in order to get this done. And if we're going to do less than 4 developers, then what we're saying is we don't want to get this done.
Keep in mind, and just because they were brought up earlier, what has been produced so far, not in terms of Special K or that stack, but in terms of RChain and Rolang and of the row calculus, and of the namespace logic paper of row calculus, of the behavioral types paper, and of the row VM target, which was achieved earlier as preliminary productions.
Yeah, specifications is how I like to think of them as well.
Well, actually, no. The VM is a lot more than a specification. I don't know if you've seen it. It runs, and that VM is solid enough to run an ATM network management system.
Exactly. Yeah.
Still needs some work. Still needs some work getting it working on Linux, but it runs on OS X for the time being.
Right. So I'm not particularly. I don't want to characterize this. I don't want to short sell what's been done, like in the last even the last few weeks.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm suggesting a review is like also for your own benefit, for the benefit of the team, because basically that roadmap will sort of become legally binding and will have to be met in order to receive funding. If the roadmap is overly aggressive, you're setting up yourself to fail.
No, I agree. I agree with that. But that's why I'm saying very clearly, 4 developers is bare minimum to even get going. I mean, if we're not going to fund 4 and 4 developers is $600K, and that leaves no money for business development or anything else. So that's just. I mean, look, the math doesn't lie here. I mean, I would love to be in a position where I had some wiggle room here. I don't have any wiggle room.
What do you mean by business development?
The company has to be set up. Accounting has to be set up. The reps.
You have AMPs. You have a very significant amount of AMPs.
I have founders AMPs. I'm not going to spend I've made a promise not to touch.
What that means is, as part of the proposal, you also receive many AMPs that you can use.
Yeah, I really don't want to touch the AMPs right now. We have money in the bank, and that's what I want to be able to pay developers with.
But we have been paying developers and every other person on the team and our community members AMPs.
Right now, for
this to change. It's a source of resources that you have.
We are in a stressed and tense situation, which is going to create all kinds of fluctuation in the market around AMP prices, which means it's not a stable source of funding.
I think AMPs is part of the mix, and even if it's constrained to be deferred compensation, is a good part of the mix. But yeah, that doesn't. I understand your point too, Greg, that you need to pay people, and they need to put food on the table and so forth.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, being realistic about the costs of setting up a non-profit and its business operation related costs. These should not exceed a few thousand a year. So let's introduce a buffer, sort of a managerial overhead buffer for that entity. Let's say $25,000, which I consider to be more than enough to operate an entity with less than 10 employees, which is a non-profit. I think it's a very reasonable, it's even a very large amount.
That's less than what Synereo had for its first year.
So I feel like that would be it's more than enough to manage an entity of less than 10 employees. And I'm referring to all legal, accounting, setup fees.
Yes, but you're not accounting for the resources that have to handle all of that. So there has to be one person to those 4 that's going to manage all of that.
What do you mean?
I mean that in addition to developers, there has to be someone who is going to do all of the management of the legal, the accounting, any business development, any of those kinds of things. So
that's a fair point. Else we risk Greg being in another management position, which we've already found out is not a good place for a developer to be anyway.
Understood. So we're discussing the compensation of, let's say,
right. So
a person within a small organization, right? So we're talking about an operational role within a small organization.
Right, exactly. So this is why I have put in, and you have now covered no operational costs. So there's no budget for machines. There's no budget for the use of Amazon or Google or Azure. There's lots and lots of little things that if you have been doing this kind of stuff, you just know in your gut already what it comes out to. It's roughly.
We're talking about the really small stuff right now. We are already.
We're not talking about really small stuff. We just added 150K.
Close to 3.5 hours into this conversation. We want to continue with this, and we're actually at this very positive point of just speaking about the numbers. How about we just continue the negotiations later? I don't think there's anything more to be achieved in this conversation.
Why don't we just give him the 8 he wants? Because that's not a big budget compared to the dinky projects I worked on at AT&T the last 5 years. Are we serious about this thing or not?
Yeah, well, to be fair, it's also a fraction of the budget that I manage in my normal function. Like the scale of the budget and the scale of it. We have to remember that we're talking about a startup and a project that is just in its infancy. And we also have to remember the fact that Synereo has made it so far on pretty much vapor in terms of money.
Yeah, well, we don't want to continue that. We want to actually be able to produce something. We want to fund it reasonably.
Very well. And I agree with that. So financial responsibility. So given the things that were said, as mentioned, it is not my function to make financial obligations on behalf of Synereo, and I don't know what sort of thinking they have to do.
It's between Dor and myself.
Jesus, what dude?
And who wants to use a platform that is this is what's going on in management? Like let's think about that from a community perspective real quick. Like, am I really going to invest any more time as a user? Because the age we're coming into is where the users are taken involved in the process. And you think that this going on, like, what do you think about that?
So I really like that point, actually, because one of the things I've tried to say is that we have to have community involvement from the get-go. And what I've found is that we're here as a community hashing out the difficult and tough issues. And that's what has made it positive. It's the community involvement, and this is where we have to head as a network. It has to be like this. It doesn't always have to be so difficult and challenging, but we have to all be engaged, and we have to bring our best selves to this process.
Yes, and exactly. And if it's not engaged, the communication isn't clear, the collaboration isn't there, the community members aren't respected, each talent isn't understood, then I personally am going to look for other options, and I'm going to promote those other options, and I'm going to do that very talently, or with my talents, with my network's talents. Like, don't you guys see that?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Patrick, and that's kind of why I'm saying this is the real nuts and bolts of what it is going to be like to have a network that is owned and operated by the people who use it. It's this kind of engagement. This is what's required. It's this kind of community engagement, and all I have wanted is that we walk the walk.
Exactly. So if you speak about the attention economy as a whole, how much attention do you think has already been invested, and what do you perceive of Jim's sunken cost for his attention? What do you perceive for Christian's sunken cost? Ian's, mine, Joe's? It isn't just as simple as okay, we're going to give you the funds and now everybody's going to use the platform. I'm tending to agree with Greg.
Okay, so the next step, so now that we're in a position where there is an agreement in principle for the new setup, and we're currently discussing, so Greg has put forward an offer. I presume Dor and his team have to consider the offer while Greg, I again suggest that you think of a third party that both of you are capable of trusting and is capable of technological review, and the sort of the first collection of milestones that are to be delivered prior to the release of the second one.
I mean, I've already got the parties in mind. I mean, what I think is if you look at what Factum did, they utilized one of their trusted milestone evaluators was Vlad Zamfir. So I think Vlad Zamfir would be a very reasonable person, and also Vitalik would be a very reasonable person, and it would also bring some attention to the process. So those are the people that I have in mind.
Great. So I think it will be best if yourself and Dor put together lists of people that you both consider to be capable of reviewing delivery, and then basically present them and discuss that list of people. So
this is great. What I see happening, what I see emerging, is a de facto governance model, right? Because that's what's really happening here, and I just wish it had been sooner.
Greg, you mean a de facto governance model for RChain or for Synereo Limited or the Synereo project? What are you referring to?
Well, right here, it's effectively for Synereo, right? We're engaged in a community process that is the results of which are to iron out a path forward so that everyone can win, right? And that's the actual governance. That's the moment of governance.
What I see happening right now is that with having the attention of the community and the community's will to get C solved out, there's a better motivation to go through our, I would maybe say, fears or objections or whatever bad feelings we have for each other, and work it out, even though we don't like it. And I think we should leverage that situation and go on with that and try to get the negotiation continuing, either through a third party that you guys happen to choose, and try to be as transparent as we can to the community on the one hand, but not communicating one-sided messages during the process on the other. Let's try to build some kind of gap, some kind of period of faith. Let's try to decide, for instance, let me try to take it practical, right? What if we try to decide that, let's say, by Monday or Sunday or whatever you pick, you happen to decide on what is that third party that you can work with to try to negotiate, and what is the way you would like to be transparent to the community. And by the time you decide that, don't come with one-sided communications to the community, because that would go into a circus again. And we meet up again on Monday, and you guys tell us what you come up with. What is the third side? What is the way you want to be transparent with the community in this process? And if any progress has been made by then, and just keep it let's say official, or keep it clean. Keep it clean by then.
It seems almost like the community, the community in this project, there's an interesting question: is who's the client? And I think the community could be treated more like the client. If I had a client, if a client hired a company to build a product, and that company that had problems with management, where there was dysfunction in the management team, you'd fire the company and go find another company to build the product for you. So thinking about the community as a client, I think, puts things in the right context, because there's so many. I'm not sure that that the client even knows at this stage. Well, treating the community as a client, in terms of the stakeholder on the project, I think is a useful way of.
State positions and always higher up positions. Anyone who's ever worked like at any executive level should understand that it is a service position above everything else, I think. Yeah, service, a leadership service.
Yes, I absolutely agree. This is about service. I am here to serve the community, and I'm also here to discover who that community is. The people who are actual stakeholders, the people who really care about making this thing work, and I'm here to serve that.
Okay, so what would you consider to be the best next steps given the agreements in principle that we've discussed here? So are we proceeding to map out those third-party reviewers? And if you're happy with the roadmap, then remains. And Dor and his team have to consider the $800,000 offer.
Who's typing furiously?
I think that's Greg.
No, it's not me.
Oh.
Can the proposal that Greg presented tonight be modified to reflect the terms that we agreed to?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I've got a proposal on the table. The table is $0.84 million to be placed as the upfront payment. The remainder of $2.1 million goes in escrow to be met against deliverables, and the reviewers for those deliverables are Vlad Zamfir and Vitalik Buterin, and let me see, probably some third parties such as Ming, and I will provide based upon the 4 developer estimate, I will provide an updated version of the roadmap, given that we have to, potentially bootstrap a development team as well as a business.
So, and Greg, you didn't mention amps versus USD in that mix. I assume those were all USD numbers and then amps on top?
Yeah, exactly.
I would suggest that the amps be mostly for community building.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think some incentives, some future incentives for developers is also healthy. Maybe not, that could be an amps.
Yeah, the Project 11 could actually be working, and we could be building toys on Alpha right now.
Project 11 makes no sense right now.
Yeah.
No, I agree. It was left to languish. So my feeling about the amps, and I agree with you, is that community building and other kinds of friction reduction in the biz dev is where amps are kind of best deployed. However, if you want to get developers in the mix, again, remember the kinds of developers that we want to attract are ones for which we've just dropped the overhead significantly. So amps over and above that 150K is a reasonable ask when we're talking about these kinds of developers. So that's so I take your point and I can accommodate it within the framework I've laid out.
Can we develop on the user interface framework stand-up applications that
I don't understand the question, Jim. Can you repeat it?
the community can still do development proofs of concepts using the front end framework.
Yes, technically that's true. There's nothing stopping you, but it's counter to my advice to essentially stop working on Special K, because I think the focus, the overall project needs focus, and
right. But
RChain is what to optimize for.
Right. We can always use a stand-in S3 or something for Special K. I'm just saying that we keep the development of the user interface that will be hooked to RChain at some point.
Oh, sure. That could be done in any number of prototyping tools without any backend potentially, but to work out a user experience. But I wouldn't put much Synereo resources behind that personally.
Oh no, I was just suggesting that we put Project 11 resources behind it.
Guys, let's get to the end of this meeting. This is not the time to talk about Project 11. It's 11:35 p.m. now. I don't think we're going to get anywhere closer to a solution in the time that we have left before we all collapse to sleep.
Well, I think one of the most important commitments is meeting regularly to finish this agreement. One of the frustrations I've had is getting Dor and Greg together at the same table, with not necessarily with me, but in a
proposal that was on the table today, it came with the guarantee to meet as often as it is required and focus our attention on it until it's resolved.
Glad to hear that.
So I don't think this entire conversation was needed, certainly not with the framing of Greg tells everyone why he thinks Dor is a horrible CEO that should step down. But now that we've come full circle again and back to the point where we were just a bit before this conversation started, and we can carry on discussing this proposal, I'm again committed to bringing it home so that we're both satisfied with the solution. Greg can carry on the work with RChain, and Synereo can continue doing what it believes in. So having said that, we can just take this offline, talk about the next steps in terms of how we're going to discuss this, and send everyone off after a long 3.5 hours.
Well, does anyone besides Anderson think that Greg's request is unreasonable? And although it's possible he could bend his constraints a little bit, why give him that angst and pain? Why not, it's not a large amount of money considering, a major software development project, and we want to let them show what they can do.
I'd like to clarify my reservation, basically why I'm pushing for a lower number and a conservative roadmap. It goes back to the ability to deliver and Dor's responsibilities as CEO. So I feel like it's simply is the financially more responsible thing to do. And it is also the right thing, I think, from a development standpoint, to commit to a more conservative roadmap and be frugal with the money. I think long term, it will be the right thing for Synereo as a project.
The special problem we have here is that, we can't get cheap the skills that are needed. And that imposes restrictions that I think we should be sympathetic to. I think Greg deserves us to give him the benefit of the doubt, not because he delivered Special K, which he didn't, but because he delivered what he promised, a scalable, decentralized architecture.
So thank you for that, Jim. I think what I want to be clear on is, if we can't fund 4 developers and some basic business then I don't believe that the proposal is serious. So, we can argue all day long, but that's a really very low number, and I don't need to. Not being able to meet that number says that Synereo isn't serious about this. So, I'm happy if you want to say that we've come to an impasse, but really this is actually quite frugal given the roadmap that we're considering. Even if we pare it down, it's quite frugal. You have to remember that we're talking about the development of a brand new programming language in addition to the blockchain, and they have to go together. There are some things that are required to go together in order to work. There are recursive dependencies within the architecture that are spelled out in the architecture. So there are some chunks that just can't be broken down any further. So if we're serious, we do this. Otherwise, we're at an impasse. So if people need some time to think about whether or not they're serious about doing this, then that's great. But right now, you can just do the back of the envelope math. And Ed and I went through this math. We tried to get Dor involved in that, but Dor didn't want to be involved in that process. So the math is, and the homework behind it is all in the links that we provided. What we're talking about now is a far reduced version of that math, and there's no one here, I think, that can argue that it's off the mark. And you can just add up the numbers yourselves, right? I'm not being unreasonable. I'm not trying to get rich. I'm trying to provide the promises to the community.
So let's decide what would be the best next step. So we have now this offer that includes a lot of things that both of you agreed on to some extent, and there's perhaps things that will be negotiated further. What would, assuming that this meeting is coming to an end, what would be sort of the timeline that works for both of you and the decisions that you both have to make the next iteration and start basically making this happen?
Well, I think everything is clear from my point of view. I've laid out the things that are required to get going, and including the operational steps. Additionally, what I think is necessary is the container for the discussion. So I would recommend that we have another discussion on Thursday, another community discussion for all those who can come on Thursday, and another community discussion for all those who can come on Friday. And hopefully by that point, we will have hammered out an agreement, or we understand that no agreement is possible.
Okay. Dor, does that kind of timeline work for you?
Tomorrow is fine, but Friday I prefer we put off until Sunday or Monday.
Greg, is that okay? Guys, let's try playing nice, okay? Let's try to at least work around each other's schedules. That's like the minimum goodwill, okay? Like, I would also like this to be resolved as soon as possible, but here's the request. So,
yeah, it's just out of respect to our Israeli members. Friday night is a rest day.
And Sunday is a rest day for the US people.
That's why I assume we'll continue on Monday.
Based on what was agreed to today, I think each side should try to develop a counter proposal, and so that way you know where all the differences might be,
So can we set a meeting time on Thursday and on Monday? Yes, no?
Well, what do people say?
Thursday, same time works at 11 at the hangout time.
I can certainly be here.
I am very likely to be able to make it as well.
I can be here.
Me too.
That's good.
Great.
Can we start earlier in the day at 9 PST? Does that work?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Good. Good for me.
Same here.
Good.
I think I can make that. I have to look. So I can confirm, but I think I can work.
Good. Then I think we are done for the day.
Thanks, everyone. Especially thank you, Andy.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you. Good to see you.
Bye. All.
Till next time, it was a blast.
Let's do it faster next time.